Okay, it's 2 after 1, so probably should go ahead and get started just so we don't start off too far behind. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Watson with NOAA Fisheries in the Greater Atlantic Regional Office in the Habitat and Ecosystem Services Division. Joined, obviously, as always, by James Boyle from ASMFC. He'll introduce himself in a second. I guess before we kind of kick off the meeting, James, did you want to run through these instructions for folks to use the GoToWebinar?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Jonathan, and welcome everybody. Thanks again for coming to our later spring meeting than usual, especially people with field seasons. I really appreciate you taking the time. So yeah, just as a quick reminder, I know this is pretty familiar to people at this point, but these are the controls for GoToWebinar, the platform we're on. So if you see the orange microphone, that means you're muted. We will have question periods after every presenter and especially the discussion at the end of the meeting. So just make sure you're muted until we call on you. If you want to speak, you can use the hand raise feature. So then I can unmute you on the webinar end. And then after that, then you can unmute yourself. Unless you've already done a mic check, then you should be able to unmute yourself, no problem. And so then, but just please raise your hand and then wait till we call on you to speak, just so it's all organized. And then you can also put questions in the questions box as well, like especially between presentations. If you want to reach out to a presenter, maybe we didn't have enough time for your question in their slot. As we move on to the next person, you can always use the question box as well. And that sounds good. I think that's it.
And just a reminder for folks, we are recording this meeting as we've been doing lately. We're going to post up the meeting recording on ASMFC's YouTube page. So this is, I think, especially helpful for folks who are in the middle of busy field seasons and maybe not able to attend today, but wanted to catch a particular talk. And we'll post that up and let folks know when that recording is live. It usually takes a week or two or something like that. So, but yeah, I think we have gotten up to 50 attendees, so that's great. Yeah, and just wanted to say welcome. I was reminded, Sean McDermott, who was here at the inception of the River Herring Forum, which was then the Technical Expert Working Group, or the TEWG, reminded me that they first met in 2014. So we are officially at 10 years for the forum. Started under a different name, but and it has changed and grown over the years. But just happy to have folks continue to come back and be interested in all issues related to science management, conservation, and restoration of river herring up and down the Atlantic coast. It's great to see continued strong attendance at all these meetings, and obviously thanks to all our presenters who continue to participate and provide updates on what they've been working on in their neck of the woods. With that, James, do you have any other opening remarks that we need to touch on before we jump right into management updates?
Nope, I don't think so. Just to note to our presenters, when you're ready to present or when it's your turn on the agenda, I'll make you a presenter and then you should be able to share your screen. And for those of you who send us your presentation, thank you. I'll have it as a backup just in case there's any issues there. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. So I'll switch to the agenda so everybody can hopefully see that there. Yep, so from ASMFC, it's a little bit quiet on the management front so far. So our update's gonna be pretty short. We have not had a management board meeting since before our last forum meeting. So in early October, we had the management board met. At that time, we had an update from the river herring stock assessment, which is really an update on the timeline, and I'll have more on that later. And then we also had the FMP review for the 2022 fishing year, which was approved at that meeting, which I also talked about at the previous forum meetings. You can find a little bit more details on the YouTube recording of the River Herring Forum, or if you go to the Shad and River Herring species page on our website, you can find the full document of the FMP review for 2022. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Katie Drew to talk about just a little bit of the update on our river herring stock assessment.
Thanks, James. It should be a pretty quick update. We have scheduled the river herring peer review, which will be held June 4th through June 7th. It'll be in our Arlington offices, but we will have a webinar option for people who would like to listen in remotely. The presentations will mainly be like the 4th, which is the Tuesday through Thursday, the 6th, And then the final day is actually just for the peer reviewers to write their final report. So if you'd like to listen into any of the presentations on Tuesday through Thursday, we will have an agenda and the link to a webinar up soon on the website. But that has been finalized, so we're making progress on getting this benchmark stock assessment peer reviewed and then presented to the board at our August meeting. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
I don't see any raised hands. Again, if anybody has any questions for Katie, please raise your hand and I can unmute you on our end, but doesn't look like there's any. So with that, thanks, Katie, and I think we're ready to move on to the Mid-Atlantic Council update from Jason Didden. Jason, I'll unmute you on our end, and then you should be able to unmute. All right, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, pretty quick here too, probably, but some things to update folks on. So there's no directed mackerel, Atlantic mackerel fishery this year in terms of rebuilding mackerel. So I think the cap might still be monitored. River herring and shad cap might still be monitored on Garfo's website, but since we shouldn't get any cap trips over 20,000 pounds, you know, I don't anticipate that cap will move off the zero line. So that, I mean, is usually the main thing we're working on. But a couple projects that I'll flag. Menominee folks continue to work on that portal project for multiple entities, whether they're a citizens group or state or whatever, to upload river herring and shad run information on like a common data portal for the Mid-Atlantic and New England. They have a student working on that, continue to make progress. They kind of provide an update to some staff here on kind of what their site was looking at. So kind of excited. I think we have maybe on our one of our end of the year council meetings, they'll provide like a presentation to the council on kind of the product. And I think it looks pretty neat and has some good potential to, you know, wrap up some of the runs that, you know, are harder for myself and or the public to track kind of what's going on. It's kind of been a long-standing project that I've had interest on, so it's kind of cool that will be there, and they're building in different capabilities in terms of folks uploading data and visualizing data and things like that. So I think that'll be cool. Other thing is, so the council's got this IRA funding grant, and it's like a two-phase thing. And one of our first kind of phase projects is trying to extend the river herring environmental risk modeling done. I think it was Roberts et al. The end of last year. Anyway, so we're contracting with Janet and I to try to extend that. You know, if we can make it a little more fine scale. They were mostly just looking at the catches in the trawl survey versus water temperatures. So, you know, try to bring in some of the observer data, maybe try to get that. I mean, it was, you know, I think they achieved some statistically significant results in terms of risk modeling, but it still may have been too broad for practical fishery operation. So, you know, can they refine that to have, you know, okay, we know the risk is going to be inshore in certain areas in the spring, but can we narrow that down and refine it to make it, you know, potentially a management tool, and we'll see what they find out. You know, we're kind of stuck in this thing of low observer coverage and what does that mean for the operation of the caps. So, you know, I think the idea was to explore if this could be another option, and we'll see what they find out. Maybe it's not practicable as a river herring bycatch management tool, or maybe it is. We'll see what they come up with. And I think those were the main things that I was looking to update folks on.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. This is Jonathan. Kelsey Roberts is going to give a presentation a little bit here, so can speak more to that study, and it'll be interesting to see if there's some follow-ons there. And then was wondering if you had any kind of ballpark on when the that sort of the River Herring Run, I guess it could the Holocene Run dashboard that Manomet is working on might go live. Is it, you think it'll happen this year, or do you think it's something that's still working its way through the process and maybe a next year kind of thing? Thanks.
And I think they've been talking to folks to try to build it out already. So I think it should be largely done by the end of this year, and available. I think the guts of it will be done this year, and then maybe over a course of a year or two, working to see who's interested in submitting data for it.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can definitely spread the word through our channels and hopefully reach everybody who's out there doing monitoring of River Herring Run. So that's I think it's a really exciting tool, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in it. So looking forward to seeing that come together. Any other questions for Jason? Feel free to raise your hands. Otherwise, we can move on to Jamie, but we'll give a minute to raise hands here. Okay, not seeing anything. James, can you make Jamie a presenter and get her all set up?
All right, I think I'm ready to go. Can you see my first slide fine?
It looks good, thanks.
Great, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present an update from the council today. I'm mostly going to focus on Amendment 10 and hopefully save some time at the end for questions you might have. This year, the council is working on a number of its priorities for Atlantic Herring. Amendment 10, specifications for Atlantic Herring for the next 3 years, which also includes specifications of the River Herring and Shad catch caps. Updating our research priorities and thinking about work priorities for next year. And then the council also the staff participates in the research track stock assessment for Atlantic Herring, and that work is ongoing. So the rest of the presentation is on Amendment 10 and the public scoping summary. Right now, what we're doing as a plan development team is we're preparing the summary of public scoping. And many of you participated in our scoping process, and we appreciate that. For those that didn't, and just a little bit of background about Amendment 10, it's to develop and implement management measures designed to attain optimum yield and improve the conservation status of Atlantic herring. And it goes on in our problem statement to talk about the important role of herring in the ecosystem, as well as minimizing user conflicts created by competing interests. The second part of the statement discusses the types of alternatives the council is interested in exploring, including those that are spatially and temporally explicit, such as restrictions, area closures, and possession limits. And the geographical extent is really pretty wide, but is a focus on areas not subject to seasonal closures right now. And then the third part of this problem statement is about enhancing river herring and shad conservation and management through developing alternatives in the Atlantic herring fishery. And this would involve avoidance and catch reduction, for example, time and area closures, or potentially reconsideration of the catch caps we have. Council's been working on this amendment for some time now, starting back in December of 2022, when they decided to revisit the Amendment 8 inshore midwater trawl closure, which had been vacated by a court. And they also prioritized an analysis of river herring and shad bycatch estimates that were low relative to other years for the past 3 years. Over the course of 2023, the committee, the advisory panel, and the herring plan development team have been working on a series of information to support the council's development of a problem statement. That problem statement, which I just walked through, was adopted back in June and then later refined in December. We've, since this time of January, been working on public scoping. And our public scoping comment period started April 1st and continued, March 1st and continued to the end of April. So it just closed a few weeks ago. And our plan development team met on May 10th to go over some of the initial findings of that comment period. Our council meets in June and will receive a report from the committee and that summarizes all of the comments received, and our The meeting is now a 4-day meeting. Council will discuss this on June 24th. That meeting is a hybrid meeting and you can join by webinar. We had 6 opportunities for public scoping. 5 of those were in person. 1 of them had a webinar option, and then we had a final webinar. I'm just going to walk through some brief information that's included in the scoping document, the questions we asked, and then a few slides to provide you some basic summary statistics about who attended and how many comments you received. In our scoping document, which you can find on our Amendment 10 webpage on our council website, talk about why the council is trying to take action, what comments should address, and there's some background information on Atlantic herring as well as river herring and shad. The comments the council was looking for is really in these 3 topics: measures to attain optimum yield and improve the conservation of Atlantic herring, user group conflicts, and potential measures to address catch of river herring and shad in the herring fishery. So the first meeting we held was in Rockport, Maine, and we had about 70 people attending in the room and 4 public comments. We had 8 council or committee members in attendance at that meeting. And the second was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. There were about 27 attendees, 1 public comment, and 2 council or committee members joined us. The third meeting in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, had 17 attendees, 11 comments, and 7 council members in attendance. In Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts, we had 44 public attendees, 29 comments, and 4 council and committee members in attendance. And then our last in-person meeting was held in conjunction with our council meeting in Mystic, Connecticut. And this was a meeting that was both in person as well as an opportunity for those to join by webinar. So by having that combined approach, we had 106 public attendees, 34 comments, and 11 council members in attendance. At our very last public scoping meeting opportunity, that was by webinar, 24 folks attended, 4 provided comments, and 3 council members were in attendance. So when we look across all the people that did attend, and some people did attend more than 1 meeting, we had almost 300 people attending these meetings in summary, and then of those we had almost 80 speakers. And then looking across all of our written comments, we received different types of comments. Some of them were from individuals, some of them were from organizations or groups. Some people gave us their remarks also in the form of a letter at our scoping meetings. And then some had what we call a form letter, where you could go to a website and fill in some details and send, and that provided us an email with people's comments. Some of that text was standardized, and other times you could personalize it. So in total, we received of all these different kinds put together 814 written comments. And now I said about these form letters that you could either fill in your details and have the standard text, or you could personalize it. And in this table, we for the form letters that we did receive, and form letter 1 had 3 different variations of it. How many were people, put their name and their address, and then how many personalized those submissions. Right now, the plan development team is working on a summary of all the scoping comments that was received. This is just a little outline of where we're headed. This was discussed by the PDT on May 10th. We'll have an introduction, a purpose, description of the commenters, and then a comment summary, and that's going to group things by themes and the problems mentioned, as well as desired outcomes and specific ideas for management measures to include. So how do you get involved? Listen to what's going on. The next steps are, as I mentioned, the plan development team met a few days back, and we're working on the summary report by correspondence. We'll be presenting that to the Herring Advisory Panel and the Herring Committee at their meetings in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which are also available by the webinar on June 13th and 14th. And then our council meets in Freeport, Maine, also broadcasting by webinar June 24th through the 27th. And at this point, I can pause and see if there's any questions about Amendment 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That was a great summary of the participation, and I appreciate you pulling those numbers together for the group today. Does anybody have questions for Jamie, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Quiet crowd. I guess in the interim, while we wait for folks to raise hands, was there a comment submitted via song? Did I see a picture of a guitar there?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We did have one participant who did submit their written, their oral testimony by performance, and he played guitar and sang the Herring Song, which is an original song that the gentleman wrote. And yeah, if anybody's interested in seeing that or listening to it, he did a video for himself, and it's on YouTube, so you can share that.
Interesting. I didn't know. Yeah, have not seen a public song comment. That's very creative. So just thought it was an interesting little tidbit there.
We also just want to show you folks on our website, and thank you for sharing that everyone can see their comments for Amendment 10. We've been updating our website since the comment period closed, and right now you can go, if you scroll down a bit, you'll see Amendment 10. It's a little bit of a work in progress right now, but all of the written comments we received by the 30th are here. All of the scoping meeting summaries are available. And as we are preparing for the next round of meetings, some of this will continue to be updated. We also plan to post written comments that were received after the deadline. We don't summarize those in our summary report, but the council will still receive those. So if you haven't written a comment and you wanted to, please look for either the committee's deadline for comments or the council's deadline. We won't put that in our master summary, but the council will still receive your comment. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And for folks, obviously on the River Herring Forum distribution, I had sent around a couple of individual comment letters from different River Herring Forum members, and then Jamie alerted me that all that information was posted online, which is helpful, and it sort of streamlines it. So if folks are interested in looking at the comments that they received during that scoping process by the deadline, take a look at the webpage here. It's there's a lot of stuff up there. It's really helpful to for folks to be aware of what the interests are, what the comments are for this Amendment 10 process. So thank you. Okay, I haven't seen any raised hands here, so last call for questions for the councils or for the commission.
Just the one question in the questions box. I don't know if you can see that, Jamie, but someone asked, are the June meetings public?
I'm sorry, I can't see the questions boxes in the chat. No, okay. Yes, all of our June meetings are public. If you go to our website, which I'm showing you right now, and you navigate to the Herring page, it's a little delayed here, you will see where we post upcoming meetings. And we have the Herring Advisory Panel meeting and the committee meeting posted to this page. As an example, I'll just click on Advisory Panel. And if you are unable to come to Portsmouth in person, you can register for the webinar right here. The same for our council meeting, which is also available by webinar. And you would go to council meetings. Next meeting shows up here for June. And once we post more information about that, there'll be a webinar link here as well.
Thanks. I did want to make a note, James, on your presentation, just about the forthcoming benchmark stock assessment for River Herring. Folks may have noticed that this meeting of the forum, it was a bit later than we typically hold it in the spring. Usually we try and hold it, I believe, around the end of March. We had pushed it back in hopes that the benchmark stock assessment would be completed and through review in time for this meeting, which it wasn't, unfortunately. But that means that our next meeting of the River Herring Forum, which is in October, or no, it's in November this year, and that's on our website as well. We do we do intend to take a deeper dive on the findings of that benchmark stock assessment and share it with the group. So obviously the details are forthcoming, but we knew that was also something that folks would be interested in, and we intend to put special emphasis on that at the next meeting of the forum. So wanted folks to be aware of that. Anything else, James, before we move into our presentations?
Nothing from me. I think we're good.
Okay. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kelsey Roberts, who's now at LSU. And Kelsey published a paper in 2023 entitled Developing a Subseasonal Ecological Forecast to Reduce Fisheries Bycatch in the Northeast U.S. And we invited her here to present her work as we thought it was very relevant to some of the discussions happening around the Amendment 10 scoping process. So with that, it's like, Kelsey, you're able to share your screen. If you want to turn on your camera, you can. We encourage it, but obviously up to you. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the organizers for inviting me, as previously mentioned. So my name is Kelsey. This work was completed as part of a postdoc project that I completed when I was affiliated with Stony Brook University and also the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I'm going to preface this talk by saying that even though this publication came out last year, early 2023, and I believe a lot of the information is actually already outdated, which is how it goes. And I'm kind of a little removed from this world now. I'm doing a completely different project using climate models, and yeah. So yes, please correct me if there's any information in here that is no longer accurate. But I'm kind of just going to give you a rundown of kind of the work that I did, and it's so great to hear that some of this is potentially moving forward, which is awesome. So setting up the kind of the why for the work is we can see the utterly massive imprint of fishing on the world's oceans. And wherever there is fishing, there is inevitably going to be bycatch. And you can see, so this is a little bit of an outdated paper. It was published in 2014, but I really liked this graphic because it indicates this regionally specific imprint of bycatch pressure, and we can see it's unevenly distributed across the planet. But if you look at the Northeast U.S., we obviously have a big problem here. So this was the focus area for my analysis, and this is not going to be news to anybody on the call, but we replicated the analysis to align with these regions of the Northeast U.S. So the Gulf of Maine, Georges Bank, Southern New England, and the Mid-Atlantic Bight. So all of my analysis was separated by these regions to be as closely applicable to fisheries management as we possibly could. Again, nothing new to this crowd, but we have our bycatch species, river herring. We did refer to these two species collectively. So I don't, talk about alewife and blueback herring individually in this analysis. We do refer to them collectively as river herring. And then our two target species, Atlantic herring and Atlantic mackerel, both obviously very well represented in the bottom trawl survey for the Northeast US. So when I began this project in 2020, this was kind of the data that I was working with. So this really set up the why for this project. This was the most updated information that we had. And it's particularly for the Southern New England midwater trawl, the problem of encountering bycatch alongside Atlantic herring or Atlantic mackerel was obviously a massive problem. Quotas were reached really early on in the year, fisheries were closed, money was lost, it was a whole big issue. This was the data, and then towards the end of the project, this was the updated data that I was working with, which was actually a little interesting to see. And I don't really have, I never really got an explanation for why this was what I was looking at. And I was wrapping up the project and it was kind of irrelevant at this point. So who knows? And I don't know what the updated numbers are. But this was really interesting to see after after the previous plots. But setting up the how we actually came about this, this multi-step process of getting into the bycatch risk forecast. So the Northeast U.S. Fishery Trawl Survey, we filtered that to only include the trawls where Atlantic herring or Atlantic mackerel were present in the trawl. So that collapsed the survey data quite a bit. We then created a separate column in the data for river herring presence or absence. So it was a 1 or 0 binomial type situation. We took a stack of relevant environmental variables and then created a generalized additive model, or GAM for short, based on a presence absence structure. So you can see here that the only dynamic variable that's included in this analysis is sea surface temperature, as that was at the time the only variable that we could effectively forecast. Obviously, there are many other environmental covariates that are applicable to fish distribution. You know, you got bottom temperature in there, you got currents. We had to kind of exclude all of that just because of the nature of how the subseasonal forecasts were provided at that time. So we did include some SAG variables, bathymetry, distance to freshwater bays, bathymetric slope, and curvature. All we, after a literature review, determined that those were relevant for this analysis. So the big question for this is, you know, we can tell fishermen, or fishermen know that there are certain areas at certain times of year, certain boxes where they need to avoid. But the real piece of this that was missing was the when component. So this is where the subseasonal forecast analysis of this comes in. So this is SubX. It's a NOAA climate testbed project, and I do need to mention that SubX has been upgraded, or yeah, I guess upgraded, because there's now a bunch of different people involved. It's now SubC. So if you Google SubX and you're trying to find SubX, you will be redirected to a new website and a new data portal entitled SubC. It's no longer SubX, but I'm going to continue to say SubX, as that's in the paper. So we're going to say SubX for consistency purposes. But this provides subseasonal predictions of surface and atmospheric covariates, and there's 6 global climate models that participate in SubX. And you can think of kind of SubX as a, if we're all familiar with kind of the 10-day weather.com forecast. So you get forecasts up to 4 weeks in advance, which is really unique instead of the seasonal and decadal forecasts that were present prior to some of these subseasonal forecasts coming online. You know, fisheries management decisions are not made on decadal scales. It's really that weekly and monthly forecast capacity that's really valuable for fisheries management decisions. So we utilize the reforecast or hindcast. Those names are kind of used interchangeably for this analysis. So that encompasses 1999 to 2015. However, forecast products are available through this site. So you now can go actually 4 weeks in advance of where we are today. And yeah, so these are real-time forecasts, and they're targeting the 3 to 4 week outlook. And we did some skill assessments to determine which of those weeks were better suited for this purpose. And you have a longer lead time of up to 35 days. I think I already mentioned that, but I just wanted to throw this in there because I think it's helpful, at least for my brain and maybe for somebody else's, so you can kind of understand. If anybody were to go download this data, the dates were very hard for me to wrap my brain around. So if we're living, say, on January 1st, 2015, the model generates a 35-day forecast. So you have week 1, which is January 1st to the 7th. Then you have week 2, January 7th through 14th, and so on and so forth. However, these models are reinitialized 1 to 4 times a week. So then the model, this hypothetical scenario, the model would be reinitialized on January 7th, which means that your week 1 is now January 7th through the 14th. So the coding for this gets a little bit tricky because you have these you have to keep track of which dates are associated with which week. But the model could be reinitialized multiple times a week depending on which of the 6 SubX lines you want to utilize for your particular research. So up to 4 times, you could take the average of those within the week. You could take the max value, you could take the min value. So there's a lot of flexibility with this product depending on what is better suited for the particular research objectives that you're working with. So we did some statistical downscaling because the model is provided at 1 decimal degree resolution. This was actually mentioned before, I think, in multiple contexts, but 1 decimal degree resolution is not super helpful for fisheries management. Really, really coarse, not fine scale enough. So we got it down to 0.2 decimal degrees, which, as previously mentioned, is still very coarse and needs to come down a little bit more. But I just definitely wanted to mention this to show that we did utilized observational data provided from a satellite product, and we were able to get to a downscaled forecast for this effort. This is the model skill that we calculated following previous literature equations that have already been kind of set in stone. So the skill is the temporal anomaly correlation coefficient between the reforecast and the satellite product. That's the way to think about that. These are the 6 models, the 6 global climate models that contribute to SubX, and all of them have different model configuration parameters. They're all very unique, but we notice here that the model skill is highest at the 1 and 2 week lead times. Week 3, we start to drop off a little bit. So the higher the skill, the bluer the color. That's the way to think about this. And we also see that there's a lot of region-specific skill capacity going on here. And what was really kind of unfortunate to see is in Southern New England, where we really do need good predictive capacity, some of these models are definitely lacking. However, it's good to know that, at least from what my research over the last couple months, is that the skill has improved actually since I have done this analysis. We also calculated a multi-model ensemble mean, which is alone more powerful than any of the 6 models standing on their own. And that was, we were able to calculate the MME multi-model ensemble mean when 4 of these models overlapped. So it generated a mean value for that. So purpose of the project, take species distribution models, take oceanographic forecasts at 1 week lead times, create a bycatch risk forecast, and then my dream was to turn this into a web-based proactive tool that would be useful for commercial fishers. Obviously, it didn't get that far, but this was what I had in mind. This was the vision. So you have these products that currently exist out there, Turtle Watch and Whale Watch, that can help different types of commercial fishers not encounter these charismatic marine megafauna. However, what's different about these types of products and what we were trying to produce was these products are generated on a daily basis. These aren't outlooks. These aren't provided a week in advance or a month in advance. It's the fishermen can go online. If you're in Hawaii, that's where the Turtle Watch product is provided. The longline fishers can look to see where turtles would be, they would most likely encounter turtles for that day. Same as Whale Watch. So that element of a week in advance or even a couple of days in advance would really, I imagine, be extremely beneficial for this effort. So to recap, so we did an Atlantic herring and Atlantic mackerel distribution model. We used the bottom trawl survey. That was our bycatch risk model. Then we integrated all 6 of the SubX models into the ecological model, downscaled and calculated a multi-model ensemble mean to generate predictive surfaces of bycatch. This is the risk forecast element, and this was the kind of the main purpose of this analysis. So the GAM was predicted onto layers where we kicked out sea surface temperature and substituted the SubX sea surface temperature, the forecasted sea surface temperature. And we were operating under the assumption that a 1 week notice would be helpful for fishermen to allocate personnel, allocate fuel, whatever needed to be done, instead of that 2 week or 3 week or 4 week window. We also wanted to ensure that we got the time period that had the highest predictive capacity, which is that 1 week lead time. And then we wanted to assess changes to forecasted bycatch risk in space and time, and make some suggestions, recommendations, what have you, for dynamic spatial management. This is obviously not an easy task because we have a human element in there that obviously we can't model. You have fishermen making decisions kind of on the fly based on information that they're getting, and there's no way to model that. The human behavior element is not included in this. But if bycatch continues to be an issue, particularly with these 2 species or 3 species, river herring, Atlantic herring, and Atlantic mackerel, any type of risk forecast product would hopefully be helpful for management purposes. So this is what the species distribution model told us. So you see spring bycatch risk on the left and fall bycatch risk on the right. And this is, again, these are vessels targeting Atlantic herring. If you wanted to see the results for Atlantic mackerel, those are in the paper. For time purposes, I don't include these in this talk. Obviously, visually assessing this, just higher bycatch risk in the spring than in the fall. And then this is the sub-X data. So this was when we substituted the subseasonal sea surface temperature forecast in place of the satellite temperature. So this is the Gulf of Maine, and this is, again, if you're targeting Atlantic herring. And what I really want to point out here is the model agreement. So this was really, even when you have these big squiggles in the plot, all of them are in agreement. So whether they're all right or they're all wrong, who knows? But the agreement was really nice to see. And these are just really unique. These are different years that we kind of selected just for visualization purposes, but we do have these plots from 1999 to 2015. And we do kind of see the evolution over time where the later years are kind of predisposed to higher bycatch risk earlier in the year. And you can kind of see that a little bit with, this is Southern New England, again, Atlantic herring target, all of the models in really close agreement. You see those later years, you kind of start seeing that higher bycatch risk coming in earlier than you do in the earlier years. This is the visual representation of those plots. Again, we're just pulling out random dates because we want to be able to demonstrate that this product is useful on a weekly scale. So this was really nice to see that you can actually visualize that increasing risk over time over on a weekly scale as we move further on in the year. So 2008 on the top, 2014, we see that increasing risk as we march further on into time. And this is same thing, just a different time of year, 2004 versus 2010. So we were thinking that a product like this, particularly if you operationalize it and put it into some type of web-based proactive tool, you could adjust accordingly based on where you were trying to fish and where these boxes were showing high bycatch risk. So just a couple conclusions. So we determined that our species distribution model was very good at predicting the biological response of river herring as well as the target species. The forecast is good at the 1 week timeframes for the Northeast US region. We do have obviously some skill lacking in the Southern New England region, but overall we're looking at very good skill at that time frame. The multi-model ensemble mean is more skillful than any model alone, which is why we utilized it for the visual representation. And all models more or less are in agreement in terms of predicting the bycatch risk for these regions, including the ensemble mean. And very importantly, we had the bycatch risk is actually detectable at the weekly stage. So subseasonal forecasts have been used in a few ecological distribution papers over the last like 5 or 6 years since this product has come out. And we were very happy to join that effort in showing that we can actually use this to predict ecological distributions. And in this particular case, we can use it in a co-occurrence space. So looking at both the target and the bycatch, looking at 2 different species that co-occur, only at certain spaces and only in certain times. It's feasible, it's flexible for fisheries management. And if managers wanted to use this tool, you could kind of go in and select which forecast model best fits their objectives. That's kind of going back to whether you need a model that's initialized more frequently, if you need that 1 week time frame or that second week, depending on when the decisions are made. And there's been numerous articles that have come out over the last 10 or so years that really make the conclusion that dynamic spatial management is more effective for many reasons than management solutions that are static in space and time. So this would be a really good opportunity to look at how this tool could potentially work with a dynamic spatial management framework for the Northeast US. And importantly, the forecast skill is only going to improve. It has already improved since I have produced this analysis. They're also working to include additional covariates, including bottom temperature, that can make this analysis even more robust. And we generated a lot more questions than answers during this analysis, but I just wanted to quickly highlight this. I'm hoping that maybe this could be kind of incorporated in the new project moving forward. But we wanted to look at the Gulf of Maine specifically, as it's the fastest warming region almost in the world, and obviously presents a huge problem for fisheries management. But I quickly did these plots right before I left. And so this is the proportion of overlap of Atlantic herring and river herring, and it's separated by region. So those colors are different regions. Years on the x-axis and percent overlap is on the y-axis, and that peachy color is actually the Gulf of Maine. So you can see here that as we move on forward in time from 1990, well, I guess this is back into the 80s, through 2020, you can see that that increase in overlap in fall in particular is increasing exponentially. And I don't know what's causing that. We didn't really get to dig into this, but that would be a really, really unique project to determine exactly why, for that particular reason, we see that increase in overlap just increasing exponentially as we go on. Thank you all so much again for the opportunity to present this work today. I'm thrilled to hear that it might be moving forward. And please just email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer anything. So.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Yeah, obviously some very promising developments there, and appreciate you coming to share the work with the forum. I'm going to drop the link to the paper in the chat for those who don't have it, although I suspect most do. And if we have any questions for Kelsey, we have maybe a minute or two here. We can take a question or two. Either enter them into the questions box or raise your hand and we'll unmute you. I see Karen Lindberg has her hand raised. Can you unmute her, James?
Yep, Karen, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me now? Thanks for that presentation. I was just wondering with your models or the folks who are continuing the models, if those are at a fixed spatial scale, or are they scale, sort of scalable, as it were? Could you zoom into particular regions, or is it at a fixed scale?
So the sub-X data is again, it's at a one degree resolution. So you could not zoom in without some really fancy downscaling. So the downscaling that we did is very elementary. There's other techniques out there that are way better and will provide a much more useful product essentially. So yes and no. Yes, you could zoom in. No, you could not zoom in with the data as you would download it. So you would have to have downscaling.
Yeah, so as you were saying, then I guess it's on its way to being useful to the commercial fishers, I guess, right?
I hope so. I do agree. Yeah. I think it was Jason that made the comment earlier that it's too coarse in its current form. So I actually I'm not involved in I've had a couple conversations with Janet, but I'm not entirely sure where the project stands as of now, but it definitely needs to be finer scale in order to actually be effective for management decisions. Yeah, even the 0.2 resolution is still a little too coarse.
Okay, thank you.
I think Brad Schondelmeyer's up next, if you want to unmute him, James. And then we'll take a question from Jesus Morales, and then we'll have to move on to the next one.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sorry, Brad.
No problem. Great presentation, Kelsey. And Dr. Lindberg kind of had my question there about spatial scale, having experience with this fishery. I would say a spatial scale of smaller spatial scales would be important. But I do have another question, kind of about the gear type. So knowing that survey gear, bottom trawl gear, and midwater trawl gear all kind of fish a little differently, would you think that this work would be improved or benefit from a comparison to any, fisheries dependent sampling data or observations?
Oh, absolutely. We had an issue getting a hold of observer data and getting hold of observer data in the format that would actually be useful and that we could wrangle for this analysis. But Janet really had a vision of comparing the output from the observer data with our risk forecast and pancaking them and seeing how our model was doing essentially. But yeah, that was the dream, to actually get some observer data and compare this. But hopefully that can be done moving forward.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Looks like Jesus put his hand down, or did we? Maybe Bragg took his question. Okay, well, with that, just in the interest of time, yep, got it. Just in the interest of time, we'll move on to our next presentation from Matt Ogburn and colleagues at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center about acoustic telemetry and originating the Chesapeake Bay and capturing that full annual migration of alewife up the coast. So, and this dovetails in nicely to some of the updates we have coming after that. So with that, if we can make Matt a presenter, and if Matt, if you want to turn on your camera, you're welcome to encourage it, but up to you. And we'll turn it over to you. And thank you for presenting.
Great, thanks for the opportunity to present. Which screen can you guys see? What are you seeing, the full thing or presenter view?
The presenter view.
All right, that's easy. How about now? Good.
That's great. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, so I wanted to share some research that we have that we've been working on. I'm going to talk about a publication that's in review right now from some of our first data using acoustic telemetry to track alewife migrations from Chesapeake Bay. And then postdoctoral fellow Henry Leggett is going to join for the second half about some of the current and ongoing work we have expanding on that topic. I just wanted to give a very quick overview of acoustic telemetry for those who aren't regularly using the technology. So the acoustic telemetry is work using a transmitter that we've been implanting in alewife. Sometimes they're externally tagged, but we've typically been doing surgical insertion. That transmitter sends out a series of clicks or pings every couple of minutes that encode an ID number, and then those clicks or pings are heard on an acoustic receiver that's a hydrophone or an underwater microphone that's listening for the tags and can interpret those numbers and tell us what tag ID number, and thus what tagged fish the detection was heard from and what time it was detected. And then the location of the receiver is also known, whether it's deployed in a fixed location or on a mobile platform like a glider. And then you can reconstruct the tracks of the tags from that information. So that's what we were doing here. And the goal of this work for our project was to follow up on and expand work we've been doing, looking at spawning runs for river herring in Chesapeake Bay, looking at watershed scale distributions, looking at run counts in individual rivers. We had been doing some pit tagging as well to look at annual return rates of fish. But the big data gap for us is what happens when the fish leave the rivers within Chesapeake Bay and then where they go in the ocean during the rest of the year. So we've been wanting to try to start to fill in that black box of where individual fish go during the rest of the year. And one of the ways that this technology can work is that there are a lot of different people using the same essential technology, which allows us to track animals over large distances. And so what I'm showing here is sort of the realm of possible places along the Atlantic coast of North America that we potentially could pick up a tagged fish using acoustic telemetry. We are part of the ACT network, the Atlantic Cooperative Telemetry Network, which is the area with green dots in the middle of the map on the left. Then the blue dots are receiver deployments by the Ocean Tracking Network in Canada. And then the red dots, and I think there's some kind of bluish and purplish ones to the south of us, the FACT network. We're able to track fish across all these networks because we're using shared regional databases that are then connected between the three networks. And several times a year, there is an exchange of information between projects in those three networks that allow us to find out where our tags that we deployed as part of our project in the ACT network are detected, even if they stray into the sister networks. So that's a long way of saying there's a lot of places along the coast where we could pick up these fish. There's also a lot of gaps. The tags that we have are set to a low transmission power, and the detection range is probably about half a kilometer or less most of the time out in the open ocean. So the tagged animal has to swim relatively close to one of these receivers to be detected. So there are big gaps in the detection range, but still it's quite broad coverage at a coastwide perspective. The map on the right here just has the ACT network receivers color-coded by project to give you a sense of how many different projects are going on in the region. And it's more than 150 projects that are actively underway in the region using this technology right now, studying a range of different species, about 60 different species. So we captured the fish for this project, this pilot project, which was done in the Choptank River on the eastern shore of Maryland's Chesapeake Bay. We captured them mostly by boat electrofishing, and then held them in holding pens in the water, tagged the fish. They went back into the holding pens until they recovered, and then were released in groups, also with a few fish that we didn't tag as well, so that they would go out with a school of fish and not as individuals out into the world. And then we waited to see where we received detections from. So hopefully it will look okay on your end, but I'll play the video that's the compilation of the tag detections. In this video, we reconstructed the possible tracks between different receiver locations. So a lot of this is simulated data. I'll show you the actual individual detections in subsequent slides. But here you can see the fish leaving the Choptank River. Each color is a different fish. We tagged 50 individuals in this first batch. We got at least a few detections from pretty much all of the fish, but certainly as they went out into the ocean, like they are right now in the summer in the Gulf of Maine, we heard relatively few of those individuals. And here you see them during fall moving back south and back to the place that they were detected up in the Choptank River the following year. We had about 10%, we had actually exactly 10% of the fish return. So 5 out of 50 tags came back the following spring. And that's a little bit lower, but within the range of estimates that we have of annual survival rates based on otolith aging. So we've seen anywhere between about 5 and 20% annual return rates in samples of fish that we've looked at otoliths. So we think this is, there is some potential for negative impacts of tagging and tagging related mortality, but we're still within the ballpark of annual survival rates for what we would expect for this population. This is an abacus plot, which is sort of a typical acoustic telemetry plot where the y-axis here is each individual tag, and the x-axis is the time that tag is at large. Then these are color-coded here based on if they're yellow, they're in the Choptank River where they were tagged. The kind of aqua color is within Chesapeake Bay, and the dark purple is if the tag is in the ocean. And so you can see that there's, especially once they get out of the river and out of Chesapeake Bay, there are relatively few detections of these fish while they're out there in open waters where there aren't that many receivers. But it gives you a sense of how many detections we got from individual fish. And compared to some other things like Kaunas rays that I study, this is relatively few. This is sort of another summary of the data. The panel on the left here shows latitude by date. And the main reason that I point out this slide is just to show that in this migration, to leave Chesapeake Bay, the fish have to go south first and then back north. And then on the return migration, they have to go south into the bay and then go back north. So it's not just a directional migration. They're having to sort of go both directions in the course of the migration. And then the panel on the right sort of shows by season where the detections are occurring. And these are color-coded the same way as in the Abacus plot. The X's on these maps show receivers that picked up one of the fish during it at least one time. But if it's an X, it wasn't during that season. But generally this shows, and then the size of the dot corresponds to the number of tag detections at that location. So a lot of detections within the Choptank River, but then you can see the northern migration, and we had one fish that went all the way up into the southern Bay of Fundy. But there were, I think, 7 or 8 different fish that were detected in the Gulf of Maine, including pretty far offshore down at the southern end of Georges Bank. We also have done an initial look at temperature with these data, and the temperature data were collected in 2 ways. Within the river, which is shown here, these were on Hobo temperature loggers co-located with the acoustic receivers. The big story with temperature here is that the fish were generally detected within their preferred temperature range for spawning. Some of the in-river detections, the river warmed up really quickly and the fish were still around sort of above their preferred range a little bit. And then the temperature data for the ocean are sea surface temperature extracted from satellite data. Obviously, these fish are not necessarily at the surface all or even most of the time, but this gives us sort of a first take at least the surface temperature where they were. And one of the things that we saw, particularly on the southward migration, is that the water temperature was cooler than the preferred temperature range, but consistent with detection temperatures at which fish have been caught historically in the trawl survey. So not too surprising that the fish are staying generally within a relatively narrow temperature range. But I think I'll stop my portion there and then hand it over to Henry to talk about what's going on next.
Matt, before you switch over, well, I don't know if you're gonna stop presenting or if Henry's gonna just share, but we did have one request to play that animation a second time. So I don't know, whenever you feel is appropriate to do that.
Yeah, I'll do that now. It's easier to go back and do now. So yeah, I'll play the animation again. But I think the summary for this portion of the talk is that we are starting to be able to get some pretty good information on where individual fish are going offshore and sort of what that migration looks like. But this is a small sample size, and so increasing that sample size will be helpful. And sorry, it's playing a little bit glitchy for me this time, but
Thank you. Yeah, it looked pretty good on our end. A little glitchier the second time, but still good.
Great. Okay. And yeah, we'll take questions on the whole talk at the end. So I'm just going to run the slides and let Henry jump in now.
Yeah, hello. Hey, how's my audio?
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so my name is Henry. I'm a postdoc in the lab working for Matt. So the first project that Matt just talked about were fish tagged in the Choptank River, which is, a major watershed in the Chesapeake Bay over on the eastern shore. And I'm going to briefly talk about some ongoing and future projects. We've expanded this telemetry work into other rivers. In 2023, we tagged 100 alewife in the lower Rappahannock. So this river is just south of the Potomac near Washington, D.C. This project's being conducted in collaboration with the Rappahannock Tribe of Virginia, who are, of course, very invested in restoring what was, historically important subsistence fishery for the tribe. Next slide, Matt. Fish were tagged in a tributary called Cat Point Creek. That was one of the traditional fishing areas for tribal members. And the tribe was particularly interested in, information for future restoration activities like dam removal and potential restocking. So they're really curious about return rates and if the fish are straying between tributaries. So of the 100 alewife tagged in the creek, 41 were detected at least once in the main stem of the river, and 2 after being tagged dropped down and then swam further upriver in the main stem later in the season. Next slide. So just last week, we finished downloading our receivers for the spring 2024 return. So we had 14 fish come back. 8 were detected at the tagging location in Cat Point Creek. 1 was detected, way further upstream at Port Royal, heading towards Fredericksburg, and 1 was detected in Occupatia Creek, which is another traditional fishing area for the tribe. And hopefully during this next data push through the telemetry network, we'll start to learn where these fish migrate in the ocean. Next slide. And then we've now started another new project in collaboration with the Rappahannock Tribe and Reed Nelson at George Mason University. This is funded through a NOAA Chesapeake Bay office. And this project's to expand tagging across multiple rivers in the Bay, with each of the collaborators leading the work in their respective rivers. So this spring we tagged 50 blueback herring in the Patapsco, Potomac, and Rappahannock rivers. Next slide. And in 2025, we'll tag 50 alewife in each river. And we are collecting telemetry data and then also samples for otolith microchemistry with the plan to link these data types together to get a better picture of variations in migration strategies within these populations. So that's just kind of an overview of our immediate upcoming telemetry work that I hope we'll get to talk about in future forums. Thanks, Matt.
Great, thanks, Henry. Yeah, and that's the end of our presentation, but we're happy to answer questions, and we're looking forward to all of the data that will keep coming in from these fish that are out swimming around now.
Great, thank you guys so much for sharing the work with the forum. I know there's a lot of interest. There was a question, and I've got 2 hands raised, but I was going to look in the questions box here. I'm not sure if you can see it. Casey Clark asked if there were any plans to tag fish from other locations, specifically was interested in fish from the Gulf of Maine, and if they may overlap in space and time with, to determine, I guess, if they overlap in space and time with alewife from other regions. I wonder if, is that something you guys are looking into? I know in the updates we're going to get, I know Kevin Job and Ken Sprinkle are doing similar telemetry work up in the Connecticut River, but do you know of any efforts up there in the Gulf of Maine?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I know Ben Gahagan has tagged some fish in the past, and I don't think it exactly overlapped when we've had fish out, but there's some data from that potentially. There's the project that you mentioned in Connecticut, and at least one in Virginia that we're aware of, but it's not part of our project to tag in other places outside of Chesapeake Bay, because that's our funding is tied to that. But I think it's a great opportunity for something that could be a much broader scale collaborative project to have some coordinated effort at tagging across the range in the different stocks, different genetic stocks, and see what happens.
Yeah, it looks like Ben Gahagan chimed in the questions box and said there's no overlap with this project, but he knows that the Hudson has blueback herring being tagged this year. So there's one more question from Gary Nelson. What size tags are you using?
Yeah, so these were V7 tags, and we're able to get at low power and about a 3-minute average delay, we're able to get about 13 or so months, 13 to 14 months out of them. So it's just enough time to get the full migration plus the return spawning event.
Yeah, thanks. Alan Weaver, if James, you can unmute him, we'll do his question, then we'll move to Ken Sprinkle.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, those 14 that returned in 2024, those were determined to be returned because you received a signal. Were any return fish actually recaptured in any of your sampling? Were you lucky enough to actually recapture any?
No.
I mean, that'd be like really.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, unless I'm wrong, Henry, but I didn't hear about it anyway.
No, Jack Ryan with the tribe was going out with a gill net as well to do their own sampling, but we never recaptured a tagged fish.
Okay, and I was just curious is it possible that a receiver, a transmitter like that could have been consumed by another fish and it's milling around and it gives off the signal and it's lodged in its stomach? Or, I mean, would you not expect that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is possible, and especially in the short term, these tags are pretty small, so the there's a good chance they would eventually pass through the predator that's big enough to eat a river herring.
Right.
But certainly, while it's in the stomach, it could be the predator that's moving around. There are tags now that change their ID code when they pass through the stomach of a predator like a fish. And so that's possible. They cost twice as much. And so for this project, we balanced, knowing that there could be some predation and movements related to that with trying to increase the sample size as much as possible. So we went for sample size on this, but that's certainly something that could be done and could be pretty informative.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, I think that's amazing, getting 14 fish out of only 100.
Yeah.
To live through the whole thing and come back.
Yeah, and that's consistent with what we've seen with pit tags and with otolith aging. It's in the ballpark of the annual survival rates of what we've seen from some of those other methods.
Thanks.
And we should also, I also just make a note that so far we haven't had one of our chop tank fish come back to a different river in the Chesapeake, and we haven't had one of our Rappahannock fish come back to a different river. So we at least haven't seen obvious evidence of straying completely to a different river, because we do have most of the major rivers in the Chesapeake Bay instrumented with acoustic telemetry receivers among the different researchers doing this kind of work.
That's really
we haven't seen evidence of that. We expect it's happening, but we haven't seen evidence of it yet from the tagged fish.
All right, Ken.
Hi, that was a great presentation. Thanks. You answered the fidelity question for location, but I'll go for finer resolution within a river system. Has there been any indication of fidelity to within a river system? And to follow up on that also, timing, early run, mid run, late run, is that something you're able to kind of tease out if there's some fidelity in that regard as well? Thanks.
Yeah, great questions. I'll take the second one first. We haven't really looked at the data in depth enough yet to look at that early to mid to late run fidelity, but that certainly is possible and will be easier as our sample size increases. We've got 19 fish to look at now instead of 5, so that's more, but still relatively small from that perspective. Yeah, within a river, we have seen some fish detected. We don't know exactly where they're spawning, but at least we know where they are. And so we have had the vast majority have come back to the place that they were tagged in the river. We have had 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 fish that have been detected in other tributaries of the river that they were tagged in, at least part of the time. 1 in the chop tank, and then I think 2 in the Rappahannock. And so there seems to be at least a little bit of movement around the rivers, within the tributaries of a particular river. But for the most part, the fish have come back to the tagging location, not some other place in the river.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. And for the rest of the folks, Matt and Henry, we had talked in the past because we're doing some similar work. So, Matt, I do look forward for us continuing to talk, and as you say, I mean, maybe there'll be some interesting things we can do between the results of our studies and so forth. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'm supportive of putting these data sets together as much as possible to learn what we can from the work, because it's a good bit of time and effort and funding that goes into doing this type of work.
Well, great. Thanks for that presentation, Matt and Henry. Appreciate you guys coming to share your work. And we are running a little bit behind, so we'll go ahead and move on to the general update section of the meeting. And that is going to be Kevin Jubb presenting on some of the acoustic telemetry work that they're doing in the Connecticut River. So Kevin, you should be able to share screen. Oh, we had one last hand raised, Maria.
And yeah, thanks, Matt, for everything you just presented there. I'm definitely very much the new person on the block here. Ken and Ted Castro Santos, who I'm now working with on this, and Matt, we've all met on this already. I'm really excited to be involved in this project. So we're doing a similar thing here on the Connecticut River, and I'm working with Ken Sprankle with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Ted Castro Santos with USGS. and I'll jump right into it. And when we have questions at the end, Ken is also on here. Ken is definitely, the brains behind this with a similar project in 2021, looking at in-river movements using very, very similar setup here. So I'll jump right into it. If I can make this work, of course. There we go, perfect. All right, so just a little bit of background on our project here. So as many of you know, we saw dramatic declines in those blueback herring passage numbers on the Holyoke Dam fish lift starting in the 90s. We also saw our tributaries see very similar drops. Then across the rest of the state, we saw our alewife runs follow a very similar trend. So there's been a lot of work. It's probably why we're all meeting here today. So Connecticut closed river herring harvest in 2002 and Mass in 2006. So at this point, many research projects, we've had a lot of adult monitoring programs. These have been established over the last few decades, and tens of millions have been spent on, recovery efforts looking at passage with dam removals and fish passage construction, research, etc. So all things we already know. So for us, and I apologize, I've got a lot on this slide here. There's a lot we hope to learn from our project here. So we want to determine rates, timing, and extent of upstream residency and downstream movements. So this is following again on what Ken had done in 2021, and at the end we'll see some of his data from those times. It sparked interest in this. His project worked really well, so we wanted to jump in. We wanted to determine some of these factors, environmental, biological, et cetera, that influence migration and movement. So again, this is once fish come into the Connecticut River, both alewives and bluebacks, where are they going? Why are they going there? And is this something that's repeatable over the seasons? Determine use of main stem habitat versus cove and tributary habitats. And this is really important because we do see both species utilizing all areas of the river, sometimes more so than others. Some years these coves seem to really be the hotbeds for activity, but looking back in the 80s and early 90s when we did have these very large runs, pretty much every little tributary stream had fish coming back, whether it was alewives or bluebacks or both. So we just really want to try and understand now in the state the runs are in, what's going on. We want to describe timing, duration, and conclusion of the spawning migration. So fish that are tagged this spring will get that in the hope that they're going to come back next year. We'll see what percentage do come back and see if that is repeatable. And then we want to describe these post-spawn movements for fish that reach Long Island Sound. So tag detections among the existing large marine acoustic array. Matt covered that very nicely. We want to determine adult repeat spawners and their subsequent movements in 2025. So we hope to get, if we can get 14% of our fish coming back, that would be really exciting for us. Compare movements and timing in all habitats, so in-river and marine between the two species. We want to compare commercial fishing activity, time and area for the Atlantic herring and Atlantic mackerel fisheries through vessel tracking data and bycatch monitoring with the marine movement detections. So we're going to see roughly where these fish are and look and see at that time of the year what kind of activity was going on in those places. And then pretty much jumping into our layout thus far, we started this project in February of this year, got out on the river. We've got 51 receivers deployed up and down the Connecticut River. These start at the mouth and we go all the way to the Holyoke Dam. We tried to cover as many tributaries and coves as possible. You can see in that upper right-hand corner there, Salmon River Cove. We know we have a lot of fish that will move up there and do nightly spawning events, so we wanted to have that covered. And then you can see more of our main stem receivers. There's an additional group of VRs that are out through consultants, and then also here at CT Deep. So we've got US Fish and Wildlife, USGS, Deep, some consultants. There's a lot of receivers in the river. And we're going to start doing downloads with gear retrievals this summer. We also, again, have receivers in the marine focus area. So you can see here, this is our Connecticut Deep Array. This is through Jackie's sturgeon work. And then you can see those two small red stars. We were lucky enough to get some fish tagged in Bride Lake as well. So we have those. Those are basically a gateway, so to speak, to make sure that those fish left the system. And then again, I won't go into this more. Matt did a really good job of covering the array that's out there. So fish collection methods, very simple. This is Ken had really gotten this process down back in 2021 with his project, well, the drift gill net, running very short sets, 10 to 15 minutes. And he and his crew and our crew were actively tending those during the time that was drifting. The mesh size, 2.5-inch stretch, 100-yard length, 8 feet deep. And near river mouth sets were started in early April and ran into May this year. The Brides Lake alewife were dipped. We have a trap there. So that was very simple. It was just literally walk out and have your choice from a few thousand fish. So that was nice. fish tags and tagging methods. We're using V7 tags. We again sat down with Matt and his group and sat down with Ted Castro Santos and really, figured out what we wanted the most out of these tags. We really want to see that at sea habitat use. So they're programmed 130 to 230 second random pings, low power continuous for 388 days. This is a surgical tag insertion with a single suture. We'll have some photos of that moving forward. And tag fish, very similar to what Matt did, were released with untagged fish in batches. So our collection efforts, these are the two netting areas to the left here. You can see that red star is our office, so we were able to work right out of here, which was great. And then Ken was working those two areas throughout the course of the day, looking for fish. And you can see here, putting the gill net out, going through, grabbing the fish, live well on board, coming back and working up those fish. And you can see here, we were able to get 102 alewife tags out and 98 blueback herring tags out. And you can see here, those orange lines, those are the bride's alewife. So we want to, make sure that we get that out there. We have about 60 brides alewives that we put out. And this was just, the numbers of alewives were so low in the Connecticut River, we weren't able to get our sample. The original plan was to have all the alewives from the Connecticut River. We were lucky enough to have fish at Bride Lake to fall back on, which is very helpful. It's unfortunate from the in-river work, but it's nice to have that suite to complement the marine survival work. So again, the tagging process is very simple. This is where Ken gets all the credit. He did all of this. Obviously there's some seasonal hands in there that are ours, but this is not possible without Ken. So we were able to get out there. The target was to tag 7 to 10 of each species a day, with 10 plus tagged or untagged put into that release bin. And the idea here was, again, to try and get these fish together with other fish that haven't been tagged, let them get back to quote unquote health, get back into a school, and then release them as a larger school. We have striped bass in the river and cormorants in the river, and these fish are migrating together. We want to try and keep them together for quote unquote safety. And then this is the last slide. This is Ted's work out of USGS. This is just looking at some of those fish from 2001, and this is just for Ken's in-river work. We're really looking forward to working with Matt and understanding how we're going to look at our data in the marine environment. But here is some of previous fish from Ken's work in 2021, and you can see where these fish are moving up. These top two fish are moving up to the area around Weathersfield Cove and spending quite a bit of time during that spawning season, then very quickly dropping out of the system. And you can also see that some of these fish potentially met their demise during that spawning process to predators or some other reason for the tag to have stopped working. So, any other questions, happy to have Ken jump in on this, but still very much in the early stages, but our tags are out. The array is out, and fingers crossed that we get fish back next year. Any questions?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kevin. It's exciting. There's so much telemetry work happening up and down the coast. There was Maria tried to have get a question answered in the previous from Matt Ogburn. So I don't know if you know what's the range for those V7 tags. How close do they have to get to their receivers in order to be picked up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would have to defer to Ken and Ted on that one, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt answered it. Things like it's interesting, water turbidity. If there's chop on the water, there are many things that can affect it. But in the marine environment, as Matt mentioned, maybe 500 meters, and then it's going to be more variable in the river system. And that's why we have an awful lot set out to help us on that front. So it's a good question, and it's variable. So one approach is to have beacon tags set out. We didn't have the ability to do that, but in some other studies, those are ways to kind of get at that. And Ted really is an expert on looking into this.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, Ben Gahagan chimed in and noted, yeah, rain and wind can significantly reduce detection ranges. So, as with anything, there's lots of variability, but hopefully we can get some good information. It seems like you guys have a pretty beefy array there on the Connecticut, so certainly in river, you'll capture most of what's going on there. Okay. Maria's hand is still up. I don't see any other hands. So we can move on to the next update. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Ken, for providing that update. Our next update's from Peter Daniel and Kelly McCartan on the fishway monitoring on the passages on the Peconic in New York. So James, if you can make, I believe it's Peter Daniel that's presenting. If you can make him a presenter, and we'll switch on over.
So we're going to switch to pit tagging instead of radio tags. This is work I'm going to be basically updating what our pit tagging returns that we got in this 2024 season. So this is pretty raw data right now. We just started analyzing it, but I think there's some interesting things that happen. So our study site is the Peconic River, which runs east-west on Long Island. And it's probably, I guess you could say, the second largest alewife run in Long Island. For Long Island, it's a fairly long river, about 24 kilometers. There are 6 barriers that you can see in the figure. 4 of those barriers now have some sort of fish passage there. The main stem of the Peconic River, you can't get very far because there's still 1 barrier along the way. But the most recent, the first fishway that was put in place, the Grangeville Park Fishway, is a nature-like fishway that was opened up in 2010. And that restored 25 acres spawning habitat. And then there's a river called Little River that's a tributary of the Peconic that you can see running north-south. And a fishway was established there and opened up in 2022 for the 2022 spawning season. Actually, the 2023 spawning season, it was opened up right after the 2022 spawning season. And this could restore an additional 95 acres of spawning habitat. The distance between those 2 fishways is about roughly a mile. And that one is a Pool and Weir passage. So you can see the rock ram fishway in the bottom left underneath the bridge. And then that's just a sign, commemorative sign for Byron Young, who former New York State DEC fisheries biologist who did a lot to get that fish passage installed. So when we do our pit tags, we've been using either 12 or there's a new size, anything from 12 to 24, but there's a new size too that's slightly bigger than 12. I think it's like 15 that we started using too. And so in 2024, this season, we tagged and released 400 fish. Now these are fish that are actually arrive at a pool right below the dam at Woodhull and congregate there. And so that's where we get all our fish from, and we tag them and release them on site. And in addition to tagging those fish, we also monitored movements of fish that we've tagged in the past years. Last year, we tagged 300 fish. And so mostly what I'm going to talk about is the returns of those fish. We also do some video monitoring, but I'm not going to talk about the video monitoring at all. We haven't really started analyzing that. So this is Grangeville, the rock ram fishway. You can see an antenna on the camera box that is downstream. You might be able to make it out, little gray wire coming out of there. And then there's another antenna that's a lot harder to see, but the text on the slides, if you look right underneath it, you'll see another loop antenna at the very top of the dam, or at the top of the rock ram fishway. So at Woodhull, here's our Pool and Weir fishway. There's an antenna upstream of the actual ladder part, and that is in a little exit. That is the entrance to an exit pool then the fish has to swim under a short little pipe to get actually into the lake upstream of the fish passage. And then this is the downstream antenna. So we have 4 total antenna. I've got some results from prior years here just for comparison's sake. So in 2022, so this is returns in 2022, in 2020. And these first 3 years are before the Woodhull passage was set up. So these are basically detected at the Grangeville Park site. Anyway, in 2020, we had tagged 403 fish in the 2019, and we had a 20% detection rate. We didn't tag any fish in 2020, so I'm not going to report any results for 2021. We did tag in 2021, so I have data for 2022 here. 267 fish tagged, 9.3% return. And then the last time we got data for prior tagged fish is this year, where we had tagged about 300 in 2023, and we got almost 31% returns, which is the best we've ever done. It's a surprisingly large number. So this is the pattern of returns, and I'm showing 2024 returns and as comparison 2021. Just so happens we had the same number of tagged returned. And so this is looking across weeks and number of detections. And these are first time these fish are detected. They're detected obviously multiple times, but this is the first time they're detected. And so one thing that people remarked on has been that it seems like the alewife run was a bit earlier this year, and our data seems to follow that too. The black bars are 2024 compared to the gray bars for 2021. So we did see some earlier returns, and also it doesn't seem like the season lasted as long. So our last new tag that showed up was around the 15th of April. But in 2021, we were getting new tags as late as early May. So it was a little bit earlier, maybe about a week earlier, and more condensed. So that's reflected by how many were detected in April. So in 2021, 71% of our tags were first detected in April. This year is 89%. Now we've got some measures of passage efficiency, because one of the things we're really interested in is obviously how well these fishways are working. Grangeville Park has worked really well. So over the 4 seasons that we've been measuring this, we've been getting from 90 to 100% efficiency, and including 96% this year of the 81 fish that attempted to pass through that fishway. Woodhull Dam, not so good. We had some detections in 2023, but they were very little since we didn't tag the previous year. That's not too surprising. Surprisingly enough, all of those did end up reaching the top antenna, the upstream antenna. But this year, we had a lot more returns, so we have a lot more to go with here, but none of those made it up to the second antenna. One of those 81 is actually a return from 2021. So that was a fish that had been caught in 2021 and returned. It may have returned in between and previously to 2024, but it returned 2024. So it's been there at least, has spawned, probably spawned in the area at least 4 years now. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of the kind of patterns of activity we've seen with these with a couple of fish. So this is a fish that I'm showing basically the 4 antennas here: Grangeville, downstream upstream, and then Woodhull downstream upstream. And so you can follow the movement of this fish and entering Grangeville, reaching the upstream antenna, and then reaching the downstream antenna at Woodhull, then going back to Grangeville, probably left the system because on March 29th, it's back again at the bottom, the downstream antenna at Grangeville, then goes back upstream, then goes to Woodhull, and then there's this whole sequence of detections for about 5 days. And I've zoomed in a little bit here so you can see what a little bit better the resolution of that. And the gray here represents nighttime, light is daytime, and there seems to be like these bursts of attempts at the downstream antenna in something sort of like a pattern, but certainly not anything that's really nocturnal. And then this is the bottom one is another tag. This is the one tag that we got that actually made it to the upstream antenna at Woodhull. That was actually one of the fish that we had released this year. And I said I wasn't going to really talk about those, but this is the only fish that we had of either the ones released last year or the ones that released this year that actually made it to the upstream antenna. You can see all these bursts of activity at the downstream antenna, and then finally activity at the upstream antenna. And you can see they're staying in residence for, at least in these two examples, for several weeks. So this is what we saw. Thousands of fish just sitting at that at the pool at the base of the Woodhull ladder. And then we put our camera in the chamber that is right before you reach the first weir of the ladder. And when we put the camera in, it is packed with river herring. So they are definitely attracted to this ladder. They're just not going up. And I'll show you another video here so you can see what's going on those in the weirs. Oops. Okay, so this is me hanging over the side of the fish ladder with my iPhone, hoping I don't drop it like I did last year. And you can see all the way up. And if you look at the weirs, you'll see herring. You'll see an occasional herring. And certainly the first weir, you can see it. You can see them coming in and dropping back out again. And the second weir, occasionally you'll see a herring going through there too, and also dropping back. So they're definitely attempting to go up. And they seem to be falling back. We tried adjusting the weir boards at the top of the fish ladder and at the entrance to the fish ladder, and tried all kinds of combinations. Nothing seemed to help, but to me, it looks like they're going up, but they're being pushed back down, which I wonder is maybe a problem with too much current. It's a little surprising. So this is what happens when you're stuck in a pool. And we had the largest number of osprey I've ever seen congregating here, along with a lot of other predators, including bald eagles. Okay, so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to add another antenna to the fish ladder on maybe one of the bottom two pools, and see if we can get some idea of how many actually make it up those rungs, and if some of the changes we can make to flow might increase or decrease the probability of them making it a little bit farther up. So any questions?
Any questions for Peter? Yep, so Jim Turk raised his hand. and unmute Jim, and then we'll go to Alan.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Jim.
Hey, yeah, hi, Peter. So I was just curious, do you know what the slope is on that fishway?
No, I don't. But I certainly have. I have the engineering drawings for it, so it wouldn't be hard to find out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it would certainly be good to look at that for sure. And then I'm not really recognizing those baffles either. They don't look like a typical baffle you'd see in a steep pass. I'm not sure who came up with that design, but
Yeah, it is. It's like a V notch.
Yeah.
And it would have the effect of concentrating the velocity of the water going in. And I've noticed that some of the fish, when you look at that video, some of the fish that are swimming up, they seem to go towards the side as opposed to going directly through the center of that notch.
Yeah, you might have to modify the fishway, but it probably would be good to get the plans to some folks to take a look at it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I agree.
yeah. Do you know if Jesus Morales was involved with the design at all or not? Because he's
No. Oh gosh, what was the name of the company? I don't offhand. I don't remember the name of the company that did it.
yeah. Well, if you can get a set of the plans,
Yeah, I think. Let's see here. Well, it's somewhere on here, I think, but no, I don't see it. It's not listed on this one. But yeah, I do have the plans.
Yeah, it may be. I mean, it sure looks like it's relatively steep, but I mean, just by eye, and we'd have to look at the plans.
Yeah.
Looks like you got some issues.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, in the chat, Ben Gahagan also asked if there was a energy dissipation factor calculated for the fishway, but I guess if you don't know the slope, that probably hasn't been done. So it sounds like some more investigation.
Okay. Yeah,
might be used there. Alan, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah. I just had so that video that was titled Mayhem, was that the same fishway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's in the tailwater where the fish are just milling about trying to enter. I was just curious,
Yes.
Is it just, obviously only so many fish can enter at a time,
right?
So I was thinking, that part's kind of normal for them to be milling around. So
Right.
are a lot of those fish at least going through the first, just at least going into the fishway?
Yeah. So if the iPhone video I showed, which I think is on the screen right now, that whole area, that the first board you see there, that's the first board. And so
Okay.
they're in, so the underwater video is taken in the pool below that first, in the entrance, which is below that first pool.
Mm-hmm. And then at the top end,
Yeah.
does it flatten out where there might be a lot of fish kind of crowding as well? And so fish get there and then they just
top end of what? Top end of
top end of that right there. That is when you get to the top of that, or they're just like fish, maybe like a lot of fish stacking up trying to exit the fishway back into the head pond, and maybe that's why the other fish were dropping back.
I don't know. It's kind of it's difficult to tell. I wasn't necessarily keeping the camera in the same angle. Because actually the reason we were doing that, we were looking for a predator that we thought maybe that was what the problem was, which we didn't see. So I was just moving the camera around everywhere, but yeah, that might be, if I put it in one place, we could have probably looked at something like that in one particular direction.
Thanks. I was just curious. Thanks.
We are running a bit behind on time, so we'll go ahead and switch over to Karin Lindberg's presentation, if that's all right, but appreciate the update, Peter, and certainly if folks are interested in talking more about the Peconic Fishways or bringing resources to bear there, we can certainly help facilitate those connections and help answer some of the questions that they may have there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I could use the help.
Yeah, I'd say just if you're interested in knowing more, please reach out to me, and I'll set you up with Peter, and we can figure out how to make that happen. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Can you guys see me? I think you can.
We can see you.
Can you see my screen or my presentation or not? Probably not, right?
We see your file explorer.
Screen. Okay. Let me see if I can bring up my presentation, such as it is.
Yep.
So can you see something now? All right. This is kind of, okay, this is just kind of let's see if I can do it this way. I had a meeting last Friday with Wes Eakin of the New York DEC. And so this is kind of just going through, modifying that a little bit, and just to set it in a little bit of context for you guys. And also just to sort of go back to a couple of years ago, I think it was, I jumped in here with a presentation that was extremely confusing about trying to figure out where Hudson Mohawk blueback herring spent their last year, and it totally confused me. But I think I'm sort of just starting to get a little bit of light on that. And also, Matt, I love these presentations that you guys just did with all the tagging. I hope that there will be a real synthesis at some point to see some of these patterns and how the otolith chemistry can help support that too. But one of the things that I think I'm seeing in blueback herring otolith chemistry is it's still kind of a bit of a mystery, but it seems like when they're at sea, they're also seeing lots of coastal nearshore chemistry too. So it's kind of confusing to me, as usual. But anyway, just to set things in context, so the Hudson River watershed is consists of, see if I can get the mouse working here, consists of sort of three parts, and they're managed as three parts. There's the Upper Hudson, and then there's the Mohawk River, so it's a very large tributary, and they join together just above Troy, New York, and then they form the estuary, and this is defined by the fact that they stuck a dam there back in the 1800s, and so the water the tide water can't go any further, but it is actually in fact tidal for 53 some odd kilometers, so it's a really long, with a very long tidal freshwater reach too, mostly down to Newburgh, although the salt front can vary a little bit with the season and so on. Somebody was saying, I think it was Peter was saying that the run seemed to be early. Everything is early this year, you know it. Everything's 3 to 4 weeks early. But anyway, so the blueback herring had been locking their way into the Mohawk River, which was inaccessible because of natural waterfalls since the 1930s, at least since the 1930s when New York's watershed surveys were initiated. And so a question in New York by the managers, and I'm not a manager, I'm just a researcher, is this a good thing for the population? So they want to know if the fact that they seem to make a beeline up to the Mohawk River and then spawn as far up as something like Little Falls, if this is a sink or a source to the population. And some work that Dan Stitch has been doing with them suggests that it depends on, he's a dam passage modeler, and this is what he would say, depending on dam passage survival. So there are a series of dams that are seasonal dams put in and out of the Mohawk every year, and depending on the mortality there, this could be it could actually be a very important source. So now DEC, as was mentioned before by Ben Gahagan, DEC is now conducting a tagging survey. So I thought to myself when I learned about this that maybe this is a really good opportunity to apply some of our otolith chemistry to look at provenance. If we could collect fish way down in the lower estuary as they're coming in from the ocean and discriminate between Hudson spawned and Mohawk River spawned fish, and then say, okay, what's the frequency of that? And that I think at a beginning, it's just going to be, like a snapshot of whatever they can catch. And so I guess after my presentation, Wes was pretty convinced that it's something we ought to do. So just to get into this quickly, New York's geology consists of some different things. So the Adirondack Massif is very old and cation depleted rock. That's up here in this dome. The Mohawk Valley, which would be kind of coming in through here, is actually largely marine bedrock limestones and shales, and it's younger rock in general than in the Adirondack region. So remember, the headwaters of the Hudson are up in the Adirondacks. Then you've got other headwaters coming in from the Mohawk. They join in the Hudson, and the Hudson Valley itself is a complex mix with some medium rocks and some old rocks. So rocks have strontium in them, but in varying amounts and isotopic composition. And remember, the isotopes of an element have the same number of electrons and protons, but different numbers of neutrons. So older rock has more of this heavier isotope, slightly heavier isotope, and it's a radioactive decay product from rubidium, which has an extremely long, half-life. It's used commonly by geologists to age rocks. But for us otolith people, we like to use it for provenance because it's a pretty good tracker. And fortunately for us, it does work nicely in the Hudson River watershed. So this was my former student, Dr. Sarah Turner. Some of you might know her. And I dug back for this little meeting I had last Friday into some of the chemistry work that we did way back when she was beginning her studies with me. And one of the things that we did, and I'd completely forgotten about, was that we measured not only water from the Hudson and the Mohawk, but also from a number of tributaries: the Catskill Creek, Rondout, Upper Hudson, which is above the Troy Dam, and then the Wappinger Creek. And these are the values of the strontium isotope ratios. And you all are going to say, boy, those are tiny numbers. Well, I'll tell you, geologists try to achieve 6 significant decimal places, and sometimes they try to achieve 7. So these are actually pretty coarse numbers for this kind of analysis. But what we see is that there is a real clear separation here, with the Mohawk being notably lower. And I was actually surprised at the fact that it was as high as it is, because most of my fish look really more, have a lower ratio than this. What the transects will look like is something like this, and I think that this might be the back end, the posterior end running this way, I think on this one, through the pointed front end or rostrum of the otolith, because the posterior is generally shorter. But what you can see here is that these values are floating around. This is a fish caught in the Esopus Creek, a tributary of the Hudson. These numbers are pretty high up here, and they sort of wander around. You can also see that strontium isotope data is very, very noisy data, and you have to smooth it. And this, if I didn't show you this smoothing, you'd see no pattern at all. But note here that this does then dip down. And where it dips down, I think this is roughly comparable in the scale. She didn't scale the strontium data to distance, but these are, I think the steps are millimeters, microns steps. But the core of the otolith is here. You see it's kind of low in strontium in the core and stays pretty low, and then it jumps up. And where that jumps up, the strontium isotopes drop down, and that's a marine signature there. But the other thing that this fish displays also is the fact that it's making repeated movements between what look like estuarine waters and marine waters. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. Now, in contrast to that, there's a fish. This is a Mohawk origin fish, and this is the lower signature that we tend to see. So this is actually very close to the marine signature. If you go over and look on this leg over here, that's about 0.709. Same deal in the Mohawk, and that's because the bedrock is marine origin, and it's fairly young rock. So you can see that there are differences here, and in contrast to the this sort of characteristic signature of the tributary in the Hudson, this kind of goes, goes from something low to something high. And where it's doing that, this fish is actually dropping down in its strontium to calcium ratio. So remember, we're talking about strontium isotopes versus the bulk strontium to calcium. And so this transect here is kind of a classic Mohawk origin fish that has to go into the Hudson to swim out to New York City and beyond there perhaps. And so we often see this big peak. Sometimes it's the biggest peak that we see is this first egress out. And then after that, I'm having trouble really interpreting a lot of the signatures that we see. Here's one that I think might be a Rondout origin, sort of a tributary with very, very high initial value. But again, these sort of Hudson River fish have a very constant, fairly constant signature compared to Mohawk River fish without that big dip down. So I do think that perhaps there's some complications. So then back to Sarah's work and our work together when we were out collecting juveniles back in 2009. This I'll never forget because on September 5th, 2009, we actually, way up in the Mohawk River, we caught 2 size cohorts of blueback herring. And so it looks like there's a bimodal spawn going on, unless these are just dwarfs, but they're probably from a younger spawn. So if we look at her young of year data, we can see that the isotopes were discriminated pretty well. That we could see the Hudson River estuary, so that's below the Troy Dam, compared to the Mohawk River, and we even caught a few fish at the very lower end of the upper Hudson, just where it meets the Mohawk. There's an island where if you're on one side, I think you're encountering upper Hudson water, and if you're on the other side of the island, you're seeing Mohawk. So it's a pretty interesting place. These 3 dots down here are very likely Mohawk River fish that were on their way out. These are samples that were collected, I think, on 2 separate dates and 2 sites, and then for the Mohawk. Just interestingly enough, a different isotopic analysis that uses oxygen has some pretty good latitudinal traceability, but it was difficult to implement it in adult fish for Sarah. But we can see that these fish that are coming from a northern site, more northern water, cooler water, have a different oxygen isotope ratio. So then if we look at those young of year versus adults here, adults, these are adult spawners that I collected the core data out of some transects that Kara Ewell-Hodgkin had collected, and we see some pretty nice separation there. So that's pretty interesting. This little outlier here was a fish caught in an upper Hudson, in a tributary not too far from the Troy Dam. It's actually in the village of, or the city of Troy, the Post and Kill, and there was just no question in my mind that the chemistry of this fish was Mohawk River. So to answer, some of the questions, they definitely are spawning in different places, and there's, within a large watershed, which is part of why they're so confusing, I guess. It was also interesting that we could also see things like taking strontium and dividing it by barium. We could see some differences that we're still kind of pursuing. So that's some of Justin's work. Justin is one of my current, and he's starting a job, an internship in Washington, D.C. today, so he's not here. But again, we're seeing now with his work that maybe we can even use ordinary, if you will, bulk strontium, which is an easier analysis generally to do than strontium isotopes. So again, here's a Hudson fish. If we compare that to a Mohawk origin fish, again, we see this little saddle here of a little bit higher strontium calcium ratio, and then a dip down as it goes out to sea and then past New York City having a good time, and then we're not quite sure what happens with it afterwards. But there are other fish, there are lots and lots of head scratchers here. This is a fish that looks like it was spawned perhaps in the upper Hudson, moved into the Mohawk perhaps, because that is feasible in the waterways there, those connected waterways. And then out to sea, spent the winter having a nice time taking shows down in New York City, and then went back into the Hudson itself. Came back and doesn't seem to have gone out terribly far. And then finally, this was a surprise to me, examining Justin's data and also going back and looking at some of Kara Ewell-Hodgkin's data. And I recall Kara just not being able to, just saying that she was tearing her hair out, trying to figure out some of these patterns. And basically, we don't see the flatness, the low flatness of the Hudson here. And we don't see the little dip, we don't see a saddle, and we don't see a dip. So I'm kind of just convinced now that these fish might be estuarine spawned fish. And I want to take a little quick detour over to a separate presentation I've got right over here. I'll just sort of scroll through it really quick. So this is what I would call a classic Mohawk fish. In fact, this might be the same one. So what we can do is we can superimpose the transect, the data right on the otolith, trying to center it on the core, and then put mark off the annuli as well, so we can take a look at that too. So we could say, for example, that this fish looks like it made its first egress during the winter of its first year, most likely. We can see this saddle shape here, especially on this side of the otolith. So there's also problems with, preparation and stuff too. But anyway, so we can see this, and then the dip down into the Hudson, and then whoop, going out. And if we, oopsie, wrong thing. If we then also look at the barium, we can see another little feature here, which is that when they go out, as they're moving through the Hudson River down through the estuary, the barium increases substantially, and there are biogeochemical reasons for that. And then when they actually get out to marine waters, it drops very low. So that's kind of cool too. If we actually superimpose these two graphs together and thoroughly confuse you, you can see that the timing is not quite the same, right? So there's actually a period here of low Hudson and sort of medium barium, but then as it moves further and further down, river is picking up more barium. In contrast with that, there is another fish. This is the same one I just showed you, I think, this estuarine spawner, which was aged at age 5. We both agreed on that. And again, this is just showing that this fish was dawdling around in the estuary, maybe spawned there, and then went out to sea. And I wanted just to point out here that the going out to sea happened after, it looks like it happened after it spent its second winter in the Hudson, so down in the estuary. And these fish, we're just kind of looking at these and scratching our heads right now, but they seem to have a very different kind of a pattern of barium. And so we're trying to dope out some of that too. But you can again see that there's differences. There's sort of some kind of a natal signature, and then maybe the estuary, and then getting very low again right there. And back to here, just again, we analyzed a bunch of these otoliths. We're seeing that there are significant differences between them, and that they can't, what we can now say is that we can definitely separate Hudson fish from Mohawk fish, but also we're still having some confusion with these estuarine spawners. But I think we have to actually put on our thinking caps about this and think about some of these patterns of barium and then other trace elements as well that we're also monitoring. Then my final slide I want to show is just a picture of what I call scary otoliths. And I want you guys who actually do age fish with otoliths to please be on the lookout for this. This is a deformation that's formed from a mutation of the, there's a protein that, or there are proteins that regulate the crystallization of, or precipitation of calcium carbonate as aragonite, the common form for hearing, for the sagittae. And these deformations actually produce a different polymorph, which is called baterite, B-A-T-E-R-I-T-E. And you can see that these are all from American shad, but they look a lot like blue eye herring. And I've just been discussing these with one of the very few fish hearing experts in the world, who says that these probably are affecting their hearing. So it seems like it's kind of ticking up. We don't know why at this point, but I am telling everybody or asking everyone who I can think of who might be looking at fish otoliths to just be on the lookout for these and keep records of them too. So I think that's it for me. And I will just, I think I can just stop sharing my screen now. But if people have any questions, just fire away.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think just in the interest of staying on time, we will move on to our next update, our last update. I think it is from Jim Early. If you can you hang on until the open discussion? And I think I saw one question in the chat and maybe one hand, but certainly a vexing problem. I appreciate you sharing some of your insights there. And if you can just hang on until we get through Jim Early's update here, then that'll at least get us, somewhat close to being back on time here. So appreciate that. Jim, are you able to? Oh, looks like you're able to share screen, and yeah, take it away. Thanks.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan and James, for putting me on the schedule. Appreciate the opportunity. And this has been a very informative meeting to participate in, for one, and just seeing all the amazing work that you guys are doing out here. This is great. And I'm hoping that while my presentation may not be anywhere near as exciting, hopefully it will help you guys to think about some ways to get funded for some additional fish work to maybe help your fish populations. And there's one thing I was trying to do, was turn on my screen, but or my camera, and I can't tell if it's on or not.
Looks like it clicked on for a second and then clicked back off. Yep, you're good.
Okay, and you can just see the presentation only, correct?
Yes.
All right, but I don't know how to minimize my camera. So squeeze it out of the way here or something. Okay, well, hello everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Early. I work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of our Northeast Regional Office in Hadley, Massachusetts. And I am going to talk to you a little bit about a Federal Highways Administration grant program that is called the National Culvert Removal, Replacement, and Restoration Grant Program. And we like to call it the Culvert AOP program, so Aquatic Organism Passage for short. And going to tell you about a funding opportunity that is open, not exactly open, but a funded project or funded program. And I'm trying to see if all right, so the program itself is funded by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or BILL, as affectionately known as. The program itself is funded for $1 billion over 5 years. So that's a pretty big deal in terms of fish passage funds coming out to the a fish passage program in general. And so that basically is amounting to $196 million annually. And the program is in its second year. So it was funded for 1 year already. And so there's 4 more years to come. And what the program is all about is soliciting competitive grants that would meaningfully improve or restore fish passage for anadromous fish. In this case, it's very relevant to river herring in your group, and also potentially some types of weir projects. And that might be if you're trying to facilitate passage around weirs, or maybe rebuilding or restoring some type of weirs that have failed infrastructure related to them. And the grant program itself prioritizes projects that are for anadromous fish stocks that are listed as endangered or threatened, and also for stocks that could reasonably become listed. And all the information that was provided to me, it looked as though you guys have continually do stock or within your monitoring species status reporting, and that none of the status reports have warranted listing, but generally with declines of fisheries, you never know. But I think that a lot of these your populations would fall into this B category. Also for fish that are identified as prey for endangered species, and so maybe your herring are roseate terns or tern populations are dependent on herring. I'm not exactly sure because I haven't looked at all of the prey relationships for herring and otherwise. So that could be another qualifying criteria. And also for climate resilient stocks. And I'm not sure also because of temperature, whether you guys are seeing movements and change in distribution for the fishes. And that might be something that also could represent climate resiliency if these fish are surviving in places where they either normally weren't, or if they need access to some of those areas. That might be something to think about too. And projects that open up more than 200 meters upstream of habitat before the end of their natural habitat. So another qualifying element that projects are prioritized on. And so why is this important to this group? Well, I did read in your habitat conservation plan that barriers to fish passage created by dams, culverts, and other human infrastructure are among the most detrimental impacts, among others. And so this really puts herring populations kind of in a really good position where if there are passage issues that qualify under this program, that we could get possible funding to some of the places that you guys might see as problematic for fish passage. And who is eligible to apply for this program? It's generally states, units of local government. So if there's counties or provinces or towns that also are have roadways within their jurisdiction, they are eligible, as well as tribal entities. And so the federal highways program was, I think, it maybe is mostly targeting department, state DOTs to be applying for a lot of this. But we have seen that other, again, towns and cities have applied for funding and have received funding in the first year. And also other groups or NGOs can also work with states to help them put together and help write their applications and proposals. So that's something to think about if you know of problems that maybe a state DOT either is unable to put together a proposal for trying to get a project together, or you can work together with them. Many of the programs that have been successful have, had fisheries agencies that have worked very closely with DOTs, and they're able to put together projects and proposals, and so that can really help some of these projects rank high. This is a reimbursable program, meaning that once the solicitations are submitted, applications are then selected, and when they are selected, funding is available, but it's on a reimbursable basis in which the project applicant or recipient is then, in the case of, say, a DOT, they would be constructing the project or going through all the phases through implementation, and then they can go out and basically get reimbursed for that project. So it's one of those, it's a little bit different than a direct funded award where the funding comes up front and then the project is implemented. So that's where in some cases it lends itself more to DOTs or any entities that have capacity to basically conduct a project and then be able to be reimbursed for it. There is a case by case that can be made for requesting funds up front. I don't know that that has happened just yet within the first year, but it certainly would be encouraged if you are aware of an entity that doesn't have the ability to basically complete the work with existing funds to then get reimbursed. So something that I can help with if anyone's interested in any of that. There's a cost share associated with it. So basically 20% of the project's total cost has to be represented by the recipient or someone other than the federal funding that would be coming from federal highways. And that Indian tribes are not required to provide a cost share, so they can apply for 100% of the cost of the project. Year one funding that came to the Northeast region, we were able to fund $38 million across 7 projects in 4 states. Maine got the bulk of the funding, and their 4 projects actually is not just 4 sites, it's really probably about 27, I think, in total, culverts and or fish passage improvement. So a lot of projects going on, and Maine DOT works very closely with the state fisheries agencies in Maine. So they have a good, approach, and they also order projects related to Atlantic salmon passage. So, there's also, they kind of had a good ID on projects that were going on and needed help for fish passage. Other projects were in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and we funded a project down in Virginia as well. I should say the Department of Transportation and Federal Highways funded the project. The service, we are helping to not administer the grants, but help with technical expertise and helping projects get applications in where need be, and also helping federal highways internally, that the service is not administering the contracts and awards. Here's a couple of examples of a few passage projects in Town Brook that are going to be rehabilitated. So they will change and basically make it so that the creek and the brook are running without any constrictions, like you will see here, or you see here in these 2 photos. So trying to make it so that all these roadways, basically, the stream doesn't know that the roadways are above them, and opening up for all passage under most conditions, if not all. And so here's the project locations, just so you can get a geographic idea of where they were. And then I'll note here in the circle that, between Plymouth, Massachusetts and the Rappahannock down in Virginia, we didn't have any projects that got funded in that whole stretch. And so based on all the information that I saw today, there's a lot of herring activity going on. And so I'm hoping that there's some projects in here that you guys might know of that are in need that could be eligible for this project, for this program. The criteria for the program are, again, conservation benefits to anadromous fish. So how, being able to describe how well improvements in a particular fish passage area will help the populations of your specific fish that you're targeting, thinking about it from a regional and watershed context. So are you part of a regional watershed conservation plan? And sounds like, many herring here are. And what are those ecosystem benefits? So how well are they not just helping the fish, but also all aquatic connectivity and habitat in general? Project design, monitoring, and evaluation. So that's being able to, show your the need and being able to put up good designs and methodologies of how you're going to monitor effectiveness and evaluate the project. And also thinking about climate change, sustainability, and resilience. So how that all kind of feeds into what the future is looking like. And we've heard a lot about temperatures and increased temperatures, and what is that going to do for distributions of fish? Maybe it changes it, maybe it doesn't. Certainly will change the climate and how rain and all the river systems themselves may or may not change, or frequency of flooding, and how to build projects that are built for the long haul. And also that piece about equity and barriers to opportunity. So working with Native American tribes and underserved communities is also one of the criteria for this. It isn't required, but it also will, those are trying to help get projects like that through where there's, challenges in entities being able to get funded. So if they don't have capacity to write good grants or just grants in general, NGOs might be able to help them and work to get them funded for projects. And if that's a big benefit to potential problems in fish passage, that'd be a good place to put in a proposal. I want to go back to this to the monitoring part right there, criteria 5, and as far as pre and post project monitoring, it is one of the criteria in there to do some sort of monitoring. And one part is that because it looks like you guys do all kinds of good monitoring, that this would be a good place. And as an example of our project in New Hampshire, or the project I should say, the City of Dover, New Hampshire is partnering with the University of New Hampshire to do some pit tagging and or possibly acoustic telemetry to help that project get monitored. So that's just an example of if some of these projects are on board and the DOT wants to do it, and maybe the fish agency for the particular state may not have the capacity to do monitoring, that you could be partnering with academia to do that work, or other folks who are doing research in that arena. So that's a really good kind of collaboration that could happen all around through this program. So with that, I know in the interest of time, I'm trying to just make it quick and not bore you with a bunch of statutes and other things related to funding and grant programs, but I see that you guys do a lot of good work and want to get through to replacing fish passage issues like you see in the upper left here, where you've got perched culverts or just disconnect in the watershed altogether and replace them with something more like arched culverts or bottomless culverts and get a lot of happy fish. So that's what we're looking for, and no hangups along the way for fish and getting them on their way. So with that, I will take any questions, and also wanted to point out that while I represent Region 5 of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which goes from Maine to Virginia, we also have a representative in our Southeast region that goes from the Carolinas down around the Bend to Louisiana. So that's Rick Campbell, and his both mine and his information, contact information is here. And so if you have any questions, I'll be tied in with James and Jonathan. So I'd be happy to answer questions at some further time down the road. And the expected date for release of this notice of funding opportunity for year 2 is in June, and it will be open for 90 days. So we're hopeful that it comes open in June, but if it's delayed, it'll be 90 days past that. So and it will also open up or show the release dates for the last 3 years. So the 5-year program, we've done 1, this is year 2, and there'll be years 3, 4, and 5. And so if you don't think you can help people get a proposal in before the 90 days after June, well, you'll certainly be able to see the dates for the upcoming years and be able to start putting something together. Although I'd recommend sooner than later. So with that, I can take any questions, and thank you for your time. And I really enjoy seeing all the good work you guys are all doing.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, exciting program, and I think one that River Herring could really benefit from. I did see Alan Weaver. I'm not sure if it's a relic hand or if you have a question, but if you do have a question, you're welcome to unmute. Otherwise.
Oh yeah, my hand was just up from the last time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Morgan Krill, go ahead.
James, a couple quick questions. Is this only open to federally recognized tribes, or would state recognized tribes be eligible?
It is open to federally recognized tribes. However, it really depends on maybe what the particulars are of, because it can still probably maybe qualify as a local government, and depends on where that nexus between and the transportation is, because most of these one of the criteria is benefits for the traveling public, right? So however that is rationalized within the application. So because you can also have almost private entities or really anyone. So I think almost generally everyone sort of qualifies. Part of the federal, it's part about who you're getting to apply for it.
Okay, and
how
then
you're getting there.
do you think a project that would require some fish reintroduction might be considered, or?
Maybe. Are there any populations of fish at all in the particular watershed you're thinking?
There are American eels, and there historically were river herring.
Okay. Yeah, not exactly sure, but maybe you can send me a message offline and we can talk about it. But yeah, most things are possible. So let's talk more about it.
Yep, I'll reach out. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Jim, are you guys running any other info sessions on this program before or during the notice period? If folks are interested to find out more, they might be able to come and ask those types of questions from you guys.
Absolutely. And I think that is planned by Federal Highways, but I'm not exactly sure. We have a kickoff meeting that's coming up in the next, I'm thinking it's in the next 2 weeks, but they haven't scheduled it yet. So they've been fully occupied with a dozen other grant awards plus. So it's been kind of a little bit slow going on their end. That is the intention, and I will find out more. So
okay.
We still haven't seen the final document. I know it's just getting reviewed by all of them. That's why we're hopeful that it comes out in June, and so that's something we're still kind of waiting for. And for me, this is all new too, because I've only been in this position for about 2 months. So I'm learning very quickly about all of your guys' work and things that all the different populations of fish that are important and can benefit from this. So get it all figured out along the way.
Yeah, we can certainly, when that opportunity goes up, we can send it out to the forum. I'm curious, a lot of our audience is, either like state fisheries biologists or folks working for NGOs. Do you think that, I guess in your experience or in the previous round, it almost seems like, I guess if it's a DOT owned culvert, which many of them are, but it's state DOT or obviously a federal culvert. Well, I guess federal wouldn't be. But anyway, just thinking, is this something that if folks were interested in pursuing, they should be reaching out to their state DOT counterparts at this point to say, hey, we know that this opportunity is coming open. And they're interested to help you maybe prioritize culverts that overlap with stuff you want to see. Maybe your state DOT has a list of culverts that are reaching the end of their serviceable life, and as a fisheries biologist, you could help them kind of say, well, these ones would be really competitive based on river herring or American eel or whatever it is. I wonder if you see like that being a productive avenue for maybe state folks or others who are interested in trying to help get their state DOT to try and get some applications in this round.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great question. And we, as an example, we saw applications come in from state DOTs. We saw applications come in from townships and also from cities. So it's kind of across the board. But I certainly would encourage, the fish folks who are here and the fish agencies to talk with the state DOTs, because there's a lot of opportunity to be had there, and a lot of states or cases can be underfunded for that work, or not being able to capture some big projects because of the funding issues. And so here there's a big opportunity to apply for funding that you might not otherwise have or be able to get. But if anybody here needs help trying to make those connections, I can also work with that. I know that in several groups that I've participated in, some of the the state DOT groups, they're working on how to prioritize projects or where they fit in with the criteria. And so, yeah, that's all what we're looking for and what we're hoping that people do. So, use all of your knowledge that you guys have of where fish problems might exist. And if you can't find a way to get an application, then we can help you try to do that one way or another.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see more, projects funded in the Mid-Atlantic, obviously given the need.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to drop in the chat just for folks, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, but the Southeast Aquatic Resources Partnership recently updated the aquatic barrier and inventory prioritization tool, which now includes the NACC, for I guess surveyed road stream crossings. If folks are interested in looking at in their area, what road stream crossings have been surveyed, what kind of information there is about the extent to which they're a barrier. I just dropped that in the chat. It's recently been updated. It's a great resource for folks, obviously, who might be putting together these types of applications, but also even folks working in other just looking at their watershed and seeing where barriers may exist. So just wanted to call that to folks' attention. But any other raised hands or questions from for Jim while we have him here? And then otherwise, I'll just follow up with Jim, if you don't mind. I'll put your email in the follow-up meeting from this, or the follow-up email from this meeting, so that folks can reach out to you with any questions. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. Yep. And I'm not exactly sure when you guys will meet again, but it sounds like it will probably be after, at least this group, as far as your meetings go, after the, well, certainly during the time that the solicitation is open. So we'll get all that information out and you can pass it along. And I look forward to hopefully working with some of y'all out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Our next meeting is November, gosh, I want to say it's the 5th.
Yeah. So definitely we, and if anything too, I can put on a different workshop or something specifically targeting all those questions and answers if Federal Highways doesn't plan on doing that or something else, so we can get all that information out there.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you all for your time.
All right, at this point, we are 10 minutes over what we posted in the agenda as being the end of the meeting. The meetings typically run 1 to 4 p.m., but wasn't sure that we'd have the material to fill the meeting. So we certainly did, as we often do. Lots of discussion, several questions. So thank you guys all for being engaged. It looks like Karen Lindberg hopped off. There was one lingering question for her, but I don't see her in the attendees list.
I'm still here.
Oh, you are? Oh, good. Okay.
Yep.
Karen, we had one from Leah Rubin. I'm not sure if you can see the questions, but.
No, I can't.
Okay. Wondering if there's any potential to see whether the patterns that you describe have changed over time. For example, looking to see if patterns hold an OLIS from the archaeological record or other historical specimens. Is that something you guys are have looked into or have considered looking at?
Well, I've looked at, as Leah knows, because I'm on her PhD committee, I've looked at Stone Age cod otoliths, and we can see, it's really a function of the preservation, as I've told her a lot. So if they're well preserved, you can actually do some reconstruction. So, and people have. So, and then you have to, if you're also looking at archaeological collections, you have to think that they are probably from people, and so you have to take into consideration what are the people, what are the cultures of the people, and what were they doing? Were they targeting big fish, small fish, all that kind of stuff too. So there, Leah, take that and go run with it. Hope you're having a nice summer.
Karen, while we have you, I know a couple maybe months ago now you were kind of interested in putting out a call for, I think, what we called like known location fish. So I guess this is another plug for the few folks that are doing the acoustic telemetry work and able to follow fish offshore and then maybe back to their previously spawning locations. It didn't sound like Matt Ogburn had gotten his hands on fish that they had tagged and then had come back. But just to clarify, those are the kind of fish that you'd be interested in looking at their otoliths.
Absolutely. And I've gotten, actually Richard Krause from USGS over in Lake Erie has handed over to me a few fish that have, I guess, something like a DST type of tag, where every time they went near, and so just for folks who might not know, the Great Lakes is all wired up now for detecting fishes. And so they're looking at walleye, they're looking at whitefishes. I don't know if they're looking at perch or not, but anyway, they're collecting some amazing data there now. Every time a fish goes near one of the receivers, they're able to get good records. And he gave me some fish that were out for 2 years. So these are gold. These fish are totally gold. So if you guys do get your fish back, and I think Reed Nelson might still be online, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. These are for the work that he's doing with Matt and others. This is just incredibly valuable. So treat them well and don't destroy them when you're polishing them.
Yeah, great. And glad to kind of make those kind of connections, understanding those types of fish may be rare to get your hands on, but hopefully we can facilitate that. We have one raised hand from Ann Zagers. So Ann, if you want to go ahead, if you have a question or an update, or go ahead.
Question. Just a question for Karen. I was just wondering what kind of equipment you're using to do the chemical analysis on your otoliths. Is that electron microprobe?
No, electron microprobes, unfortunately, are not that sensitive. They're great for, they're great for things, for elements that are abundant, but most of what we see in otoliths are not terribly abundant. We use, what I'm using most of the time these days is two instruments hooked together, a mass spectrometer that's sort of tuned for, well, it can pick up a lot of different masses, but especially good for heavy masses, and then hooked to a laser ablation unit so that you can basically ablate very, very small samples, run it as a transect across the sample or make a map with it, and then pull out those data. And that's one of the instruments that's got one of the best sort of all around general purpose. Every instrument has its drawbacks. The other analysis I talked about was looking at the stable, or not the stable, but the isotope ratios of strontium. And for that, you need a more sensitive instrument. It's a variant on this mass spectrometer, which is called a multi-collector mass spectrometer, and it basically has little what are called Faraday cups that can catch the different masses much more precisely. And so those are used for things like strontium isotopes and mercury isotopes and stuff like that. And this is not really new anymore, but people still call it kind of the new isotope chemistry. But it's a field that still, it's difficult to do and it's expensive. So that's why we don't see tons and tons of papers about it. But those are, there are a suite of different types of instruments. And so if you want to get into it, you can contact me and we can have an offline chat or something about it. But, and I can give you more detail on costs and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. I think you guys can see the agenda pulled up. Obviously, we're going to, if folks want to stay on a little bit longer for just open discussion, happy to participate in that and just take us to 4 o'clock. Obviously, if folks need to jump off, feel free to do so. We will present the entire meeting recording. But at this point, we did want to, discuss it. Are you guys open it up to discussion? And I wanted to offer a few prompts. One being, that we are looking at sort of the 10-year, where we are at the 10-year anniversary for the River Herring Forum, at least in its, its functionality, maybe not in name. But wanted to see, obviously, some folks maybe have been here the full 10 years that were involved in that technical expert working group that then morphed into the forum. If folks had reflections on where we've been in the last 10 years, where we might go in the next 10 years, obviously would be interested to hear that, maybe for the edification of folks who have not been here for that full decade. And then another thing to consider sharing with the group would be anything of note associated with World Fish Migration Day, which is coming up next week. It comes around every 2 years. If folks have events of interest that they want to share, feel free to raise your hand, and we will we'll open the floor to folks who want to provide any updates or reflections that they may have. So I see Alan Weaver raise his hand. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, so just real quickly, I've been involved since it was the TUG. It was very useful throughout the whole process, and it's still very useful. It really helps a lot to not just work in Virginia, but it's very helpful to see what's going on in the other states to our north and south as it relates to river herring. So I definitely appreciate the continuation of this as the forum. And then for World Fish Migration Day, we had our event on May 4th because we didn't want to compete with Memorial Day weekend on Saturday. So we had our typical partners here in Richmond. We had RES Res, Kathy Hoverman with Res. She was our leader to organize it again, along with James River Park System, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, James River Association, Virginia Outdoors, and of course our department. And so we held an event down in the city of Richmond. We had some live fish that we collected to show adults and children. Fish and Wildlife Service had fish art type things for the kids. James River Association had some oysters there. So it was a really good event. We had about 80 people show up. It was kind of a cold, dank day, so there would normally have been more people at that boat landing anyway in the city, but it seemed like people actually came to the event because we advertised it, because most people that were there to see our displays and talk to us about World Fish Migration Day. Then that afternoon, I held a tour, pre-registered. People had to pre-register for a tour of the Boecher's Fishway. We had 33. We had a cap of 35. And we had 33 people show up for the tour up at the Boecher's Dam Fishway, where we collected fish from the river and showed the group, and they got to see how the vertical slot fishway works at Boecher's Dam. So we've already had our event. Looking forward to see what others do up and down the coast for next weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That's glad to hear that you guys were early celebrators there and had some good turnout. I did get one comment in the questions box from Alex Croft, he shared an event I'm going to put in the chat. I'm not sure if everybody can see the questions, but that is an event that looks like it is associated with Save the Sound and other partners up in Windsor, Connecticut. So folks in the area that are wanting to attend, obviously encourage that. And then I included the link for the World Fish Migration Day events search page. So if you're looking for things going on in your area, I encourage you to participate. And we sit in a unique spot to be able to sort of keep river herring in sort of the cultural vision. It's a species that folks can identify and connect with. Obviously, that's changed as sort of the large scale fisheries have waned in our lifetimes, but as biologists and folks generally working on conservation and restoration, I think we have a distinct opportunity to connect people to these fish that may be swimming under the road that they drive over every day but have never seen. So hope folks can find a way to participate in that in that program as well, or other ways to raise visibility. Any other questions or comments? So we'll wait, let's say, until 3:55, and then we'll move to adjourn. I don't know, James, if you had anything that you wanted to add, or if we covered everything we were looking to cover. But I think Anne's hand is still up. Ann Zegers, I believe that's probably a relic hand. There you go. So just, folks, we've got 39 folks still hanging on here. Obviously want to, the whole point of the forum is to be a place where we can discuss and share information. So if folks have anything they wanted to share in the last minute, please raise your hand. Maria, let's see, there you go. Looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a question for Peter. So with all those fish coming back that you've seen, did you detect any tagged fish from other runs? And if you did, were you able to find out where they were from? We've got a couple here on Martha's Vineyard that snuck into our run, and I'm trying to figure out how I can reach out to people beyond Cape Cod who, where that to see if the pit tag numbers line up with what they have in sequence from their tag.
Yeah, I have yet to, I've been doing this for quite a few years, and I've yet to get any tags from anywhere else other than the ones that we released. So that's very interesting. Now, I don't know, but there isn't any really real repository that I'm aware of for all, pit tags. But maybe, I mean, there's a limited number of sources for pit tags. So it's possible you could contact the one of the companies, either Oregon RFID or Biomark.
Yeah, because I'm in touch.
They might be able to tell you.
Yeah, I'll contact them. Maybe they keep track of their lots and who,
They
purchased.
should.
Yeah. Great idea. Yeah, that would probably be a really good way to do it since there's no network for the pit tag.
Not that I'm aware of. How many have you gotten that are?
It was just a couple, but it was really, we're not getting many back. So it was really interesting that there were two there, and who knows, they might have been in striped bass stomachs. I don't know, but it's just really interesting, and I'd like to try. We checked some local runs, around Cape Cod, but we checked some other places too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll check with Warren at Oregon RFID, and I've spoken with people at Biomark, so I'll see if that might be a means. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Maria, if you have any, success there, I'd request, I guess, if you're able to report out at a future river hearing forum meeting, folks might be interested to know. So. Yeah,
that would be great. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we covered all the bases with. Was it a test tag? We really covered our own bases with our numbers, and it wasn't anywhere in the sequence that we have, so yeah. Okay, thanks. Great meeting. I've never come, so I loved it. Thank you.
I have one question, just putting it out to everybody, but maybe the NOAA people, and especially, I don't know, but would it be feasible, do you think, to equip commercial vessels with receivers so that they could scan through, how could you just sort of pick up a troll hull and just sort of run a scanner underneath it or above it or something and pick up readings? Could that be done?
You mean pit tags?
Of tags, of any kind of tags, yeah. I'm not a tag expert, but it seems to me that would be an amazing way to be able to say, start quantifying some mortality.
Somebody started chiming in there.
Hey, Gianno, can you hear me? This is Kevin. I don't have a hand raise feature.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you're staff, if you've been a presenter, you can't raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so the way that fishery takes place, I think because the fish come in, they're pumped in big numbers, and I've seen pictures like conveyor belts. I don't know if you could build like a pit reader around where the fish are. I think you should be able to. In theory, the question is, would somebody allow that? I think that would be the part where we'd be hung up. But that's a really interesting and potentially inexpensive idea.
Yeah, so because it would pick up potentially multiple species too, so it could be really quite nice. Anyway, it's just a thought I wanted to put in there.
Yeah, interesting thought, Karen. I can't say that where I sit in the Habitat Division, I'm that closely linked with what it would take to make something like that happen. But it's certainly good to raise the question, and we can circle back and see if that's a project that folks are interested in pursuing. We can see what it would take to get it together. Yeah, for pit tags, it seems like it would be not, aside from getting it installed, Kevin, that's a good point. At least technically would not be a difficult thing to implement.
Can I add something else, Gianno?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't raise my hand. Yeah, I realize there's only like 22 people left, but yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for, bringing Amendment 10 stuff up. And, that's anyone here in Southern New England, this has come up a lot over the last decade and a half here, concerns over bycatch, and now having it, more, I don't want to say public, but at this point, I guess, yeah, it's kind of a publicly accepted concern. You can see like the scoping meeting, it was 800 and some odd letters that were sent in. So it's nice to have this be part of the conversation. We've been discussing dam removals and a lot of the other suite of very well known and very well studied issues. Having bycatch, which has also been very well known and very well studied, but all very much under the radar for decades here, included in this forum. And as a, it's a place that I know myself and many of the researchers here in Southern New England are very happy to have, involved at this level now. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. It was really good having these people on today.
Yeah, I think, one of the benefits of the forum is to connect folks that are working on river herring, maybe in specific rivers, to that broader community, and certainly the at-sea piece is part of that. So I think, our goal is just, as we did with sharing the, the letters, is just to share information, make sure that folks are aware of, if you're working with river herring, what's happening throughout their life cycle, and, just share that information and facilitate that connection. So, yeah, happy to continue to keep folks plugged in there, and we'll see, obviously how the council process, how it plays out. But yeah, so it's happy to do it. I'm glad you see it serving a role there, and I think that's one of the pieces that the forum has always been, here to do. So
thank you.
Yeah, David Messina. James, if you can unmute him, go ahead.
There we go. If the next meeting is November 5th, and I really thank you for setting these meetings up. That's election day, so you might want to pick another day. If I misheard you, I apologize for that.
Let me double check. I want to say that it was the day before election day. It's the Monday, so not the Tuesday. We typically do it on a Monday.
Okay.
So yeah, I was hoping folks wouldn't be too distracted the day before election day.
Yeah, November 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good catch. And as always, it's hard to schedule around busy folks, but if folks have thoughts on when and how we meet, certainly feel free to send them our way. We're always looking for ways to improve participation and figure out what works best for everybody. So thanks. With that, yeah, I mean, we can move to adjourn unless anybody has any last burning questions, or James, you had anything you wanted to contribute?
No, nothing to add. I really appreciate everybody taking the time, especially to our presenters. And obviously keep an eye out for the river herring benchmark assessment at our August board meeting. You can find more of that information on the commission's website on our calendar. That'll the dates of that meeting, and once we get closer, the agenda for when the Shad River Herring board meeting actually is within those meetings will come out later in July.
Okay, well, with that, 10 years down, 10 more to go, right? Yeah, look forward to our meeting in the fall. As always, we'll send out a call for presenters, about 2 months ahead of that. And yeah, thanks for sharing your work for those that have, and we'll look forward to seeing more good work in the future. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.